afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Chat. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and for the next 2 hours, I will be your host, your guide through the education of cannabis. That's right. On Wednesdays, we call this Professor Weed Wednesdays because we want you to learn something about this cannabis sativa plant that has the whole world upside down. We've got nations voting on legalizations over the next week or so. We've got the state of Maine opening up for adult use recreation over the last week. We've got a Bangor, Maine policeman taking to Facebook to explain those new laws and the new realities of using cannabis in the state of Maine. We will also have excerpts from a past show. In fact, I can't believe it, but it could have been even a week ago. This has been a very long week, let's just say. Okay, Andrew Elk, who is, one of the directors of education and training at Revolutionary Clinics and a friend of the program, he was in studio with us. We'll be showing you excerpts from that interview because we found it to be so informative. We want to share and remind people about some of the things that we learned from last Wednesday's Cannabis Chat show. I cannot believe that at this point in time in 2020, I used to host sports talk shows. Now I'm hosting cannabis talk shows, and that chat room is open. So we encourage your questions on our chat room. And if we want to and we look at them, we deem them worthy, we will answer those questions. Chances are we'll answer most of them if you chat with us on our live stream. And of course, this is just one of 3 live 2-hour talk shows that we produce here at Pro Cannabis Media, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 4 p.m. Eastern to 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'll be here all 3 of those days, but I always bring in special guests. Sometimes I get in-studio guests, and more importantly, we're able to now Zoom into people's living rooms, so we'll be Zooming interviews with 3 key people over the next 2 hours or so. 3 really cool guests, if I might say so. I'll also give credit to our staff here. Dan French, our studio director, and Isabel Turner, our production coordinator, have done a great job of getting this studio ready today and also coordinating the guest appearances. And if I had a drum roll, we'd have a drum roll. And then, you know what? It wouldn't even make any sense because you probably have never heard of Bruce Bugbee. He's a professor of botany at the Utah State University, and he'll be joining us at 4:30. And he just came off being a featured speaker at one of the larger online cannabis webinars that are all over the internet these days. And we will talk about actually growing food, not just cannabis, growing food on Mars. Yeah, that's that planet you can see in the southeast quadrant of the world tonight, because we're live. I can say today, if you look outside, if you happen to be watching this on delay, and it's like, I think 6:30, southwest sky, little red dot, that'll be Mars. And yes, I believe it is visible to the naked eye. The other guest that we have on at 5 o'clock is a guy by the name of Grant Smith Ellis, who has been with us before, if you're keeping score at home. He was one of our guests on the Cannabis Chat show that we do on Fridays with David Rabinovitz that we call The Green Rush, the business of cannabis. That's Fridays from 4 to 6. And of course, we had a few challenges, technically, let's just say, last week on Friday when we just couldn't produce a show, so we live streamed an old show. It's what happens sometimes when you are so dependent on technology to live stream. Back in the day, you just had to worry about the transmitter transmitting the information over the air in radio and in TV. You know, they actually still do transmit radio and TV over the air. No one remembers it, but they actually do. You can actually get a radio that gets music and news, and same thing with televisions these days. You actually can have over-the-air channels. You don't have to go through Netflix or Hulu or Comcast or RCN or Verizon or any of the other carriers out there. You can actually get content over the air for free. Now, I don't want to get into a discussion about how there really isn't anything free anymore, because the products that are advertised on all commercial television Trust me when I tell you, it's all built into your consumption of those products or services that you're seeing advertised. But anyway, at 5 o'clock, he will be joining us. That is Grant Smith Ellis. And he is kind of he also hosts his own podcast. He is an education person that is involved with MassCan. So he's an educator for MassCan. That's the Massachusetts Cannabis Group. And our friend David Rabinovitz is involved with MassCan. And he's the one who introduced this to Grant. He does a whole thing on education online. You can use Google and find him relatively easy and check out some of his podcasts. He'll be joining us at 5 o'clock. And then at 5:30 is a gentleman by the name of Nurse Mark. Mark Worcester is his name, and he is now part of the Green Nurse Group. And if you're not familiar with the Green Nurse Group, Sherry Tutkus is a registered nurse who is kind of the founder of the Green Nurse Group. In fact, I don't think it's actually kind of a founder. She is. And she's been hosting shows on Facebook now for at least 2 years, because that's as long as I've known her. And she's the one who introduced me to Mark, who I believe is her new partner in the Green Nurse Group. And I can't wait one day to actually get Sherry in on one of our shows, because she and I have co-anchored the old News Dabs weekly video that we used to do here at Pro Cannabis Media. That kind of morphed into Weed Talk News that I do with Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net. And yes, once again, we will be having a Weed Talk News produced tomorrow night and for release on Friday. That's when we get reports from Deborah Borchardt at the Green Market Report. From New York, we get Solomon Israel's Canada report. He's with MJ Biz Daily International out of Canada. And we also get a report from Washington, D.C., and our friends from the Vote Pro podcast. That'll be Phil Adams and group down there in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where absolutely nothing goes on anymore because nobody wants to do anything before the election happens. So guess what? I voted today. Yes, I did. And I was very, very happy of the fact that I was able to fill out my ballot and then drop it off at the City Hall. I even took a picture of it before I dropped it off, and then I took a picture of me putting it into the actual bin, if you will, or the collector of voting ballots that's out front of the Needham, Massachusetts post office, City Hall, where I voted. And that's where all the ballots will be collected. And I'm pretty sure I've already gotten a confirmation that they received my ballot. So this is definitely the first time I've ever voted by mail. And I got to tell you, I actually feel like it's more secure than when I walk into a polling place and they ask me my name and where I live. I tell them, they tell me which ward I go into because I can never remember that. And then they just check you off, but they never ask for your ID. Are you kidding me? That's how we vote in this country. They don't ask for your ID. They just want to see that you registered in that name at that address. Just saying. I felt this way was more secure than that way. That's how I feel. So at 5:30, about 90 minutes or so away, we'll be talking with Mark Worcester. He is the Green Nurse, or Nurse Mark. He's part of the Green Nurse Group, and he is nursemark.com. And yes, indeed, he'll be joining us as well. Now, as I mentioned right off the top of the show, that we would be doing a few news items, what have you. There are a couple of things I do want to mention before we get to our first little soundbite with Andrew Elk from Revolutionary Clinics. And as you know, delivery licenses in Massachusetts are being introduced and starting to be applied for, not necessarily divvied out just yet, but they're out there. We'll get an update from Grant Smith Ellis on that. But I can tell you that some interesting news notes came across the desk today, and I think I'll actually throw this out at you because it's about as far away a place as you can possibly get. Did you know that New Zealand, which really is on the other side of the world, they are going to vote a nationwide referendum on the legalization of cannabis in the country of New Zealand. And that's on Saturday. And interestingly enough, it's a very close. It's practically split, 49%, and 1% no opinion. So that could go either way. In New Zealand, something to think about. We'll certainly have results on that. As we mentioned about the state of Maine, they have opened up their recreational sales. And I believe on the first day they sold $100,000 of weed, which they think is a big deal. But just keep in mind, it took Massachusetts, I believe, 4.5 months to get to $1 million a day. Now, the state of Massachusetts and the state of Maine, even though they were one once, they actually were one state once, there are differences. There are differences in laws, there's differences in population, differences in people and the makeup and all this. But Maine has always been my second home. I spent my summers up there. I spent 11 years of my career at the CBS affiliate in Portland, Maine, doing sports for them at WGME TV. And as you know, in the United States of America, even though 11 states have now legalized cannabis sales for adult use, every law in every state is different. Now, Andrew Elk from the Revolutionary Clinics talked a little bit about how challenging it is to actually know some of the laws that are unique to Massachusetts and different from other states. Check it out. You used the word trichome.
Yes, trichome.
One of the things I like to do on this show, because of the vernacular, everybody seems to have, different buzzwords, terpenes, and trichomes.
Right.
Can you define what a trichome is?
Certainly. So a trichome is that when you look at a cannabis nug or a bud or a bit of flower, and you see that characteristic sort of sugar crystal, it almost looks like a frosting of sugar across the texture of the plant.
Yeah.
So those are individual little sacs filled with terpenes and cannabinoids. So when we're extracting, when we're making a cannabis concentrate, we're basically separating plant material from those little sugar crystals. It's inside those sugar crystals that we have our THC, our CBD, all of our special cannabinoids that make us feel good, and then terpenes, which are flavor and have their own sort of medicinal effects.
Man, this business has gotten really complicated, and you need a chemistry degree just to go out and find some decent flower, right? Some decent bud, and you don't need a clipboard or an album cover. Back in the day, you don't even know what albums are, do you?
Of course I know what albums are.
Thank God. My God. Okay, so that was educational, but it had nothing to do with different laws in different states because your host, me, screwed it up. I introduced the wrong clip. My fault. We actually have 4 other clips from Andrew that we have queued up and cut out from that show from last Wednesday. We'll be sharing them with you. And I'm going out on a limb thinking, we all make mistakes, but it's important that you learn from your mistakes. So I'll actually refer to my notes this time, instead of relying on my memory, to remember which one is next. And that was what are trichomes, and I hope you paid attention so you learned something about cannabis net, about cannabis sativa, the plant. Crazy, crazy day. That's what I can tell you about today. Now, we mentioned New Zealand. There was also another news item that I found. Everybody might remember Isaiah Thomas, and not the Isaiah Thomas that played for the Boston Celtics, but the Isaiah Thomas that is the 2-time NBA champion for they called themselves the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons. And Isaiah, like so many athletes, and again, I don't like to call them ex-athletes because I believe that once an athlete, always an athlete, okay? Just saying. It's not like you lose your athletic ability. You may lose the ability to play at a high level anymore, but you're still an athlete in your brain. Anyway, he is now the CEO of a cannabis company. It's called World Pharma. It's a Colombia-based producer of cannabis and hemp ingredients. And, he talks a lot about, in this article, about how sports helped him prepare for leadership positions in business. It's always a theme of a lot of former athletes who get into business and use their, they understand how teamwork works, putting together a team, everybody plays to their strengths, you help out other people's weaknesses, and therefore you have a solid championship team on your side, whether it's a business or an actual youth team or a professional team or a semi-pro team. But Isaiah Thomas is the latest former professional athlete to enter the cannabis space. And we did talk a lot about Maine and how they have opened up their recreational sales. And sure enough, there's a character in the police department of Bangor, Maine. And by the way, I worked in Maine. You pronounced the name Bangor, not Banger, okay? Bangor. Very simple. Very, very particular about that. My friend Tim Throckmorton still does sports up there in Bangor, Maine. Anyway, this guy, this policeman from Bangor, took to Facebook, and I guess he does posts. The guy's got a lot of followings, and people listen to him, and he's very funny. He's a very clever law enforcement officer. And his recent posts about the new laws in Maine were picked up by Marijuana Moment, which is a great newsworthy newsletter that I get daily in my in-mail box, and I certainly recommend it to anybody who wants to learn about what is going on around the United States of America in the world of cannabis. And because it was new, he decided to do a little rant about the use of cannabis, and he's pretty funny. This is the first thing he says. Everybody wants to ask him questions about the laws. Right. And the laws are, Google is your friend. Read the Maine state statutes. Ask your friendly and professional purveyor of marijuana. He goes on and on and on, and you can Google it and find out more. But as we always do on this show, at 4:20, we do take a break. And for those of you in the cannabis community, a lot of you already are familiar with the 420 code. That was the time that the group of high school students in San Rafael, California in 1971 used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue across the street from their high school and catch a buzz. And that's how that 420 code became part of the vernacular, because law enforcement picked it up and used it as a code to say, hey, public consumption of cannabis going on at the corner of so-and-so and such. Check it out, it's 420. The cannabis community uses 420 as a time to partake and enjoy. Class is over, work is almost over, go out and relax, get yourself a little buzz. My story is at that time, around the same time in 1971, Jonathan Edwards' song Shanty was the rave in New England, because it all talked a little bit about what Jonathan Edwards used to do when he sat around with his friends. So every 420, we take a break and we enlighten you about the song called Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Take it away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
And we want to thank our friends at WSCA Studios up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for that little clip with Jonathan Edwards. And that song, Shanty, was my 420. I was not part of the Waldos. I was part of another group, and we'll protect the identity of some of the people who I know are still out there and watching and all that neat stuff. But that was back in the day in the early 70s, and Jonathan Edwards' song was played on a regular basis on a local radio station in the greater Boston area, Cambridge actually, WCAS 740 AM, daytimer. It was alternative rock back then because WBCN was the rock station on FM, and FM was like, you know, revolutionary. Now it's like, please, nobody even goes on the radio anymore. Everybody wants to pick and choose what they watch, pick and choose what they listen to on your own time, in your own way, as opposed to the old days that used to be, we used to dictate, we being the media people, we used to say, if you want to watch this episode of MASH, you better be there at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on Thursdays or whenever the heck MASH was on back in the day in the 70s and 80s. And I used to watch, well, on my dinner breaks back in the day. But anyway, that was a long time ago. We are waiting for Professor Bruce Bugbee to join us on Zoom in just a few minutes. And I can tell you a little bit about Bruce, or since you're queuing that up, Dan, should we run another soundbite? And if I want to, huh? All right, let me see if I can get in the right order, because that was really important for me. And I know which one it is. So this one that we're going to run here is about being a connoisseur, being a sommelier, being someone who specializes in cannabis. And there is a cult that is evolving about this, the connoisseurs of cannabis. Anyway, Andrew talks about the different strains. Check it out.
Part of it. You know, there is higher and lower quality flower production, and some of that is what soil you grow in, whether you use soil at all, the conditions of the growing. Just like you can have high quality tomatoes grown on the vine or low quality tomatoes. The big thing is understanding, like test percentage is what a lot of people shoot for as the standard for success, right? If you have a high THC test percentage, used to be that 25 was the be-all end-all, now 35 was the be-all end-all, and now they're a high, basically, you go back to the 60s, we're talking about 6% THC. That's what the Beatles were smoking.
Yes, it was.
And people say, oh, this isn't
Do you know
the
who
stuff.
gave the Beatles their first weed?
Who
you
is
don't
that?
know this?
No, I don't.
I found this out. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but it was Bob Dylan. Who told me?
David Beatonstock.
David Beatonstock from the
Wow.
greatest moments in weed history.
Wow.
And I knew the answer, but I
Yeah.
couldn't play. I knew. I said, as soon as you say the name, I'm going to
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah.
It's Bob Dylan. I said, isn't it Robert Zimmerman? Isn't that his real name? Anyway.
No. But that's one standard that
Yep.
people shoot for. But a lot of it has to do with plant structure. Is it frosty? Like there are a lot of criteria that people look for in cannabis. Is it the right shape? Does it have sort of this frosty, trichomed exterior? So there are things like I can taste and I can appreciate really high quality stuff. Like our Black Mamba, our last couple batches of Bootylicious. Like there are some really special strains in the Rev Clinics lineup. And there's also just cannabis. You know, there's just weed. You know, there's stuff that you just smoke.
All right, we're back. And, you know, it is amazing to me how quickly the cannabis culture has evolved to develop connoisseurs, to develop the, what do they call it, designer strains of cannabis. And in just a few minutes, we're hoping that Professor Bugbee will join us, and we'll talk to him about hydroponics. Actually, I'm going to try and get some tips from him on how to keep my deck plants alive. And yes, those deck plants have nothing to do with cannabis. It's a hibiscus, and there's a white flower, and there's a pink flower, and there's another white flower. And I couldn't tell you exactly what the names of these flowers are, but it is what it is. So anyway, we will continue to fill here. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy, Bruce Bugbee, though. He worked with NASA. And has anybody ever seen the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? Really a fun thriller, science fiction thriller about an excursion to Mars. There was another Netflix series recently that had something to do with that too. I think they called it Away. But anyway, this guy, Bruce Bugbee, actually consulted with the producers of that movie, The Martian. And if you remember, there's a scene there where they're actually growing vegetables on Mars. Now, granted, it was movie, so it was make-believe Mars. But they are already talking about an expedition to the red state. That would be not the red states of America, but the red planet. It's a planet, not a state. I know, it's a planet. I know that. Anyway, it's going to be in the sky in the southwest. I think it's in the southwest tonight in the sky. The red planets will be able to be viewed. So he's worked with NASA. He talks about self-sustaining ecosystems, which I guess if you're a botanist means you can actually create a way to grow food to sustain itself. Yes? Wait, hang on a second. I don't know. I'm going to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to ask him to define it. But my guy right there, Dan French. Now, can you punch yourself up, Mr. Studio Director? You're going to talk. We got to see who's doing it, okay? Now tell me what an ecosystem is, will you please?
One, it's ecosystem.
Ecosystem. Think, there's one. I think economics, not economics. Anyway, go ahead.
From my understanding,
Yeah.
things, various plants that work together, like what Dozy was talking about, that work together and keep the system self-sustaining.
Gotcha.
So it can go through many generations of a life cycle and just stay in one place.
Okay.
And let's say like around a pond,
Yeah.
weeds have an ecosystem around there.
I get you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Now, are you a botanist but no, you just knew that because you're most recent high school graduate in the room. I can understand that. Anyway, thank you very much for that enlightenment. That's what we do here on Professor Weed Wednesdays is we try to enlighten you. And now I'd like to be enlightened by connecting with the professor, but we're working on that as well. But it's interesting that this guy, Professor Bugbee, criticized the use of indoor farming as a means of solving food shortages. And it has to do with the fact that there's a large amount of electricity. And you know, we visited the only solar-powered dispensary in Massachusetts last fall, I believe, and that is Solar Therapeutics down in Somerset, Mass., which is the home of Jerry Remy, but also just outside of Fall River. And they are the only dispensary in Massachusetts to be totally solar powered. And I really wonder why more grow farms out there aren't trying to do more solar powered systems. Even if they're using indoor grow lights powered by the solar, makes a lot more sense, and it also saves a lot of money on electricity to grow these plants indoors. And that's what they're working on. Now, if you could actually hear my studio director, Dan French, say, he actually referenced a former guest on this show called Dozy Mbonu from Philadelphia. And he has a very interesting product. Now, I'm not even sure, did we ever get the soundbite from Dozy? We did. Okay, great. And it's a long one. So we could, I really wanted the professor to hear about this product, which is really what the plan was during the show. But when you're live, you really have no control over whether someone is going to either walk in that door and be your in-studio guest, or pick up the Zoom call, click, put the audio on, put the video on, and join us live. We certainly have invited quite a few today on this show, and we are still hoping to connect with Professor Bruce Bugbee. And if I know Isabel, she's working very hard and trying to connect with that guy right now and contact him. I will say the guy's been at Utah State since 1981. And it was when he first started working with NASA in 1981. And he was part of the team to first grow crops on the International Space Station. This is why I really wanted to talk to this guy. First of all, I love space travel, science fiction, all that crazy stuff. And I just am interested to hear what he thinks about where we're going now with space travel and exploration. And I think I actually saw a rocket with an American astronaut in it take off from Russia for the International Space Station somewhere in my memory over the last 24 to 48 hours. So I'm just saying that's still going on, and I'm guessing they're still growing crops up there on the space station. And this guy, Professor Bruce Bugbee, was instrumental in making that happen. I will say that if he finds out about this product that Dozy told us about on this show, he's going to get very excited, because I think anytime that you can use organic material and throw it back into the world, into the earth, this is good for the earth, this is good for the material, and we all know that organic vegetables and fruits seem to be more potent than non-organic fruits and vegetables. So that being said, Dan, we've got Dozy queued up, do we? Almost, he says. Okay, and there he is. So without any further ado, rather have me explain about this fungi that he's involved with. We're going to let Dozy explain what this fungi does and its impact on its potential impact on the entire cannabis industry. Check it out.
But during that decade, my aunt, Dr. Janneret, was working for the Department of Agriculture's Forestry Service. And I would go on vacation with my mother and brother in the summer to see her.
So just dump out of them. We got the professor. We'll come back to it and then re-queue it up. Yep. Okay, so guess what? We heard the doorbell ring on Zoom, which basically means the Professor Bruce Bugbee has joined us. And I think we're just looking to get connected. Hello there, Professor. How are you?
Hi, Jimmy. Yeah, good. I'll hang up
So
here.
I was reading your life story to my audience to fill some time till we connected. So I appreciate you joining us. How are you?
Yeah, happy to be here. So
you've been at Utah State since 1981?
yes.
Well, that's very impressive because I graduated college in 1979, so that we're kind of age appropriate. That means in a lot of ways. So first of all, I think it's awesome the work you do, and I was talking a little bit about your work with NASA because I am fascinated with space travel, science fiction. I understand that we're actually going to be able to see Mars in the sky tonight, according to my favorite weatherman anyway, locally here in Boston. So can you please tell me how you first got involved with NASA and how you figured out how to actually grow anything on Mars or on in other planets, on the moon? Explain a little bit about your self-sustaining ecosystems. Go ahead.
But by the way, just as a note, your image is kind of, it doesn't show people, it shows a camera. Maybe the one I'm seeing is something different than everybody else.
Yes, it is. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback. No, they're actually looking at me in the studio. And
the one I'm seeing
we've got four cameras we get to pick from, and that's the one that you get to see that one, and the audience is seeing another, but I appreciate you picking.
Oh, there you are.
Tell me a little bit. Yeah.
There you are. Great. Yeah, seems more personable now. I'm looking at you.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is sort of my life story in 20 seconds or so, but I grew up doing a lot of, in a rural place and doing a lot of repairs and building stuff. And I had the opportunity to do that because it was rural. So early on in graduate school, I started thinking about, gee, I could build some boxes and growth chambers and do tests on plants with temperature and light. And this was a long time ago. It was way before LEDs. And that led to my interest in doing this in graduate school and using controlled environments. And we like to say around here, our plants never see the sun and they never touch soil. It's just so very controlled. That isn't completely true because we use greenhouses, but it's highly controlled so we can very precisely test hypotheses. So as I was finishing a PhD, a position came up at Utah State University on a project funded by NASA. And here I was already doing these controlled environment tests. And so I got the position, and you never think you're going to stay at one place for a long, long time, but one thing led to another, and I love it. I'm still working on it. So.
Now, I also read in your bio that you were a consultant on the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, one of my favorite flicks. And I'll never forget that scene where they were actually growing potatoes in that makeshift greenhouse on Mars. Can you tell us a little bit about your role on that?
Yep. Somebody else put that I was a consultant. I mean, I did do a lot of interviews about that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't technically a consultant in the early stages of the movie.
Gotcha.
But I did over 20 interviews for magazines, and most of them wanted to know, how real is this? How technically exact is it? And, you know, it's fun for a botanist to find all the little things in that movie that aren't strictly correct. But hey, it's science fiction, you know, just enjoy the movie, and it's not every little detail has to be correct, but it's that movie really catapulted an interest in space exploration and particularly in growing food away from planet Earth.
As far away, quite a few million miles away from planet Earth, in fact. I saw that on the news today, too, with my favorite weatherman locally here. Let me ask you about your feelings about indoor farming, though. And I was just talking as I was filling while we were connecting. There's one solar-powered cannabis dispensary grow in Massachusetts. It's called Solar Therapeutics. And I believe the entire building is solar-powered. They get 60% of their total power for their grow facility in that same building from solar. Doesn't it make sense with a crop like cannabis or hemp to use the power of the sun to grow this stuff? What are the challenges with that?
You're exactly right, Jimmy. I have a video online that has several 100,000 views. And the title of it, it's a lecture I gave in a university class. And the title of it is Why Indoor Farming Won't Save the Planet. And so, and I'm shutting off my cell phone.
I think, how much fun is that?
The reason is as efficient as solar panels are,
yep,
and as efficient as LEDs are, that's still two big steps that are less than 100% efficient. So it makes sense to use sunlight directly, which is what you suggested.
Yeah.
Now, when we do that, we also have to take high wind and high rain and hailstorms, and there's a lot of other environmental factors that are not optimal in order to get free sunlight. So then we use greenhouses, that helps. Mm-hmm. And if you want the very highest quality of a very valuable commodity, then you can pay for all the solar panels. But it does take somewhere between 2 and 3 acres of solar panels to light up 1 acre of production. So it's not a 1-to-1. You can't, 1 acre of solar panels won't give you 1 acre of sunlight.
How important is the growth of hemp to help the climate change that pretty much everybody in the world recognizes, except for a few, let's just say? How sustainable can hemp be to curing a lot of the ills that wreak our environment these days?
One of the answers I give to this is when we look at indoor growing of, say, lettuce, for example, which is also a big enterprise, very fresh, very high quality lettuce. If we can get people eating more fresh vegetables because they're high quality, that'll reduce cancer rates. And what's the value of that? That is an enormous value. Mm-hmm. So if we can get people to have better diets, better pharmaceuticals, the public health benefits can be just enormous.
You mentioned diet. It's not something I like to talk about too much because I consider my diet, I'm not proud of it, let's just say, but it's been part of me for a long time. I also recognize that plant diets are superior. There's been some tremendous documentaries I've watched about that. Are you a vegan? I got to throw it out there. Are you a vegan?
No, I aspire to eat less meat.
There you go.
And I do my best, but honest, meat is really good.
Yeah, that's what I say to the kids that are surrounded by vegans, and I always say, I really like the taste of a hamburger. I'm sorry, it's part of my world, right?
For me personally, I just try to eat less meat, and when there's a choice, and I don't claim to be a vegetarian. I just try to eat minimal amounts of meat, and for that matter, animal products.
We touched a little bit about climate change, and I do want to kind of keep on that theme for a second because, as you know, the western part of the United States, California, Oregon, even Washington State, they've been devastated by these horrific fires. As you know, what happens with fires, ash happens, and then you've got just a desolate, almost like the lunar surface it looks sometimes after a fire. How is science, and specifically your field, how can that help bring back the green that was part of that area in the United States?
Yep, thanks for that question. I'm in a department that's called Plants, Soils, and Climate. And the climate scientists in my department are all engaged in studying climate change. What people don't realize is there's really not an argument about whether there's global warming and whether it's caused by CO2. The argument is the extent to which all of that causes erratic weather. Right. And if it causes erratic weather, then we got a problem. What's wrong with gradual warming? The Canadians have that T-shirt, I'm in favor of global warming. and you say, well, Miami might flood, so let them move. You know, what's wrong with that? But erratic weather is the controversial part of this. And you can see how that can be really controversial. Does it change airflow patterns globally? There's pretty powerful evidence that it does, in my opinion, when I study that literature. But boy, that is a hard change of behavior. The result of that conclusion is we should use less fossil fuels. And boy, none of us wants to have to do that. That's the hard part. If it was easy to do, we would have done it a long time ago.
That's right.
So now we're really requiring extraordinary proof that we need to stop using fossil fuels, because it's super hard for all of society to do.
And the use of hemp can take the place that we could use. So many hemp can be transformed into so many different products. So and now at least there's a movement. There's the Farm Bill of 2018. Of course, now you've got the government involved, and one department's pointing the finger at the other department to say, okay, it's your responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. Well, what if they put it into food? Well, it's really part of a drug, and nobody wants to take responsibility for regulating it now that it's out there. Who knows what's going to happen in our government over the next few weeks? Let's just leave it at that, shall we? That being said, the role that hemp can play as far as job growth, as far as better for the environment, all of those things are in play now that you can grow hemp relatively legally in the United States, correct?
Yeah. The term that we have used for people, the university uses this term. We are studying botanical medicines. And 100% of people say, oh, that is really, really good. Keep studying those. And then we say the key one is cannabis.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, well, if you're studying it for a botanical medicines, it's sort of related to not eating so much meat. It's eating more plant products. And now we're using pharmaceuticals from plant products. This is all good. It's very fundamentally good. So when we go to legislators and say, you need to make this more legal, we should say, you need to make botanical medicines more legal.
Right.
That's a very politically acceptable thing.
Well, we're getting to the point now where they're actually talking about psilocybin. And we actually interviewed a really interesting guy from the Philadelphia area who's got a fungi that can be used to serve as a catalyst in all plants. That's not, you understand that, don't you?
Yeah, sure.
Can you explain how that works?
Oh, as an example of that, these cannabinoid molecules are synthesized by cannabis, uniquely synthesized by cannabis. But once we understand the molecular biology of that, we can take those genes and put them in fungus. And there is certainly the theoretical potential to make cannabinoids with fungus, not higher plants. And there's many drugs that we know how to do. It just turns out it's cheaper to grow the plant. Even though you could make it in the lab, it's so expensive. It's cheaper to grow the plant using free sunlight. But we keep coming back to, if you put a spin on it, like drugs are bad, well, that's just terminology that sounds negative. But we just as well can say botanical medicines are good. And that's a real positive spin.
Right. And I'm all about positive spins. In fact, I can't believe that in 2020, I used to be a sportscaster. I used to have a sports talk show. And now I'm talking about cannabis. I mean, I never, in my own home state of Massachusetts, where it's now legal for adult use and has been since 2016. What are the laws in Utah? Do you have a medicinal program in Utah?
We do. And Utah is politically a pretty conservative state, but they recognize the value of, botanical medicines. And some of it is mothers that had kids with epilepsy And then we brought them in front of the state legislature and we said, look, do you want us to keep going to Colorado and buying this illegally, or are you going to let us grow it here? And it was a powerful argument.
Yep.
So we now have legalized both medical hemp and medical marijuana in Utah.
That's
you
great.
need to have a license to grow it, but
Right.
it's legal.
And I'm sure now, are they in Massachusetts? They tax the adult use, but don't tax the medicine side. Are they obvious? They're not taxing the medicine in Utah, are they? Or
No, they're not, and it's only legal for medical use in Utah. It's not legal recreationally here.
Right, and then I'm assuming that there are doctors in the state that are certified to justify a prescription, if you will, for a medical card, similar to what they have here in Massachusetts.
That's
I mean,
correct.
I should have done I did my homework on you, but I didn't do my homework on the state. Okay, so don't knock me down a half a grade or anything on my interview. Okay, I appreciate that.
I'm an easy grader.
So am I, by the way. I'm a sucker. You know, I tell people, you all start with a C, and if you do the work and you do it well, you're going to get above a C. Okay, I said, but if you end up with a C or a C plus, it means you really got an F. Okay, so please don't let me do that. Where do you think the future is going to go in this development and this research? I mean, the science has taken it so far. They've understood now that the endocannabinoid system is part of all mammals. You know, we're talking about it openly now. We're not going around the corner to imbibe or anything like that. But are we, you know, if things move in the direction I'm hoping, you know, I'm from Massachusetts, you know, in the election, we could see it decriminalized. Now, if it gets decriminalized at the federal level, will that open up the research that I know you want to see open, right?
Absolutely. And all universities get money from the federal government for all kinds of things.
Yep.
And for that reason, all universities are, even though it's legal in our states, we're very reluctant to do work on high THC cannabis because it's still federally illegal. But about 3 seconds after that becomes legal, there's a lot of us that are poised to do wonderful studies on this and really take advantage of all the beneficial effects.
You know, Professor Bugbee, I've talked to a lot of scientists, professors, botanists, you know, the scientists that are in the testing labs. By the way, by far the smartest people I've ever interviewed. Now, granted, I was a sportscaster. We make it, you know, very clear. But I am fascinated with the fact that you can actually dictate the DNA of a plant now to make it a percentage of THC, more terpenes. It's amazing to me the advances on something that was considered a weed, right? We're going to see more of that now?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And when you think about it, Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of DNA 70 years ago. I mean, a long time ago. Yep. So we've had this long running start on manipulating genes to have desirable effects. So there's a tremendous infrastructure that we can apply to this. And again, it improves the benefits and minimizes the risks.
And that is about it. And you'll find so many other things. They discover new cannabinoids all the time now in this plant. And it's going to be interesting to be on the outside or even on the inside of this industry and talking to others like yourself who have certainly understand the science better than I do, since my idea of science was astronomy when I was at Tufts University. So, and that's why I knew that Mars was going to be in the sky tonight. Well, it's always in the sky, but we're actually going to be able to see it tonight. One more thing, I did notice in news recently that the Americans, an American astronaut went up to the International Space Station, I believe this week, to join, and I think she went up, or I think it was a she, went up in a Russian rocket to the International Space Station. You're nodding, so I was right? I did actually see this.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about this most recent thing, but we certainly have been sending
Yeah.
astronauts to the space station on Russian rockets now for a while.
Yeah. And are they growing stuff up there on that space station?
Yes, we are. We've got a small plant growth chamber up there, and from time to time we are able to get funding to do specific experiments to try some different things. But in between those experiments, they can still use it to grow like leafy greens. And those are very prized among the people on the space station, fresh greens.
Well, and of course, there's a follow-up question to this that I have to ask. Will we ever see the day where they will grow cannabis at the International Space Station, or is that science fiction?
Oh no, none of science fiction always becomes real eventually. But I think the cannabis is more likely to be on Mars. That by the time we get to Mars, the space station will be retired. Here's an example, Jimmy.
Yeah.
I'm involved with this multi-university group funded by NASA. It's called the Cubes Project. Some of my colleagues, they're at UC Davis, are looking at putting the genes to synthesize aspirin into lettuce. And when you go to Mars, pharmaceuticals degrade. So not only do you need to grow your own food, you need to grow your own pharmaceuticals on Mars. And so if we can make certain types of lettuce make aspirin, for sure we can. We don't need to put genes. The cannabis already has the genes. All we need to do is recognize the beneficial effects of it and then grow it. And
fantastic.
I think that's going to happen. Now, don't ask me exactly when, but I think it's going to happen.
Well, I hope we both live to see that day, Professor Bugbee, and I really appreciate you making the effort and joining us on Cannabis Chat to enlighten us a little bit about this amazing plant that has an incredible upside, can really make a difference and change other people's lives. And I can tell already that you've seen that happen in your home state in Utah, and hopefully we'll see more of that, correct?
Yep, we're looking forward to it becoming federally legal. And again, that's not science fiction. I think that's just a steady march toward the day when it'll happen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Professor Bruce Bugbee from Utah State, for joining us here today. And we'll keep in touch. And please like, share, and subscribe, as they say in social media, if you know how to do that. I leave that up to the young people I work with, just for the record. All right? Thanks again,
Thank you,
Professor.
Jimmy.
Appreciate it. That was really fascinating, guys. I mean, this is why I love what I do in so many ways, because I meet the smartest people I've ever met and look at the future, where we're going to go, and what role this plant can actually play in the future history of not just the United States of America, but the whole solar system. That's pretty crazy. All right, we got to take a break, and then when we come back, we're hoping to talk to our next guest. So don't go away. And I think, Dan, are you going to play this new, this is going to be the debut, I think. Is it the debut of the new? Yeah. Check out the new debut of the Pro Cannabis Media Sizzle Reel. Check it out.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 million in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro-cannabis story.
And I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love pro-cannabis media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro-Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro-Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, so what'd you think? What'd you think? Did you like that? Didn't you like it? We already made a few edits to it, but there's a lot of stuff on there and a lot of people that we've met and talked to and interviewed over the years. You did see Bruce Linton in that little promotional that we talked about, and we'll be talking with Bruce Linton after this live stream that will be coming up, probably in just about an hour or so. So we sit here in the studio, we interview people for another hour, and then you'll see an interview that Kurt Dalton and I did with his friend, Bruce Linton. I suppose he's my friend now too, because he wears that Legal Seafoods t-shirt that's so cool that says legal on it. It's fish in the shape of a cannabis plant. I'm not sure you've ever seen it, but we've got our guy. We've got Grant with us. Grant, are you there?
I am, Jimmy. I just getting my camera plugged in, apparently. Very nice to see you, or hear you at least.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to hearing, and we're glad that we're hearing you, which is obviously the first step. And then hopefully, and there you are. And you're a veteran. I called you a multimedia journalist. Are you comfortable with that title?
Oh, I thought you were going to call me a service veteran, and I said, no, goodness, I'm not a service veteran, but I would say I've had some media experience.
And you are, what David Rabinovitz, our mutual friend, told me about you is you actually do live stream the Cannabis Control Commission meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, they used to, the commission used to stream the hearings themselves, but after they went virtual, their staff couldn't really broadcast it, so I actually do it directly, yeah.
There you go. And I also noticed that you host your own podcast and you have like a virtual education center with MassCan. Tell me how that all came about.
Well, MassCan's Virtual Ed Village, for folks who don't know, the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition is one of the oldest cannabis activist anti-prohibition nonprofits in Massachusetts. Goes back to 1989. That organization is known for its yearly Boston Freedom Rally, but it also does a lot of other great things, one of which is an education village. The Education Village started under the tutelage of a wonderful MassCan board member named Catherine Rifkin about 7 years ago, maybe a little bit less, 6 years ago. And it has evolved slowly over time from in-person panels at various events, like at the State House and such, to now an online iteration. I don't host it myself. It's actually a platform for members of the community, but we've done 18 of them since COVID started and reached over 100,000 people, which I think is a testament to the kind of the community's impact on cannabis, without question.
Grant, we just interviewed a professor of botany from Utah State. His name is Professor Bruce Bugbee, and he's all about ecosystems and self-sustaining, being able to grow plants, including cannabis, on Mars and in the space station. And he totally embraces it and says this is the future. This is where we're going to go. Are you amazed that in 2020, in Massachusetts, where it is a adult use legal product, that we're able to talk about cannabis and continue to educate the public about this amazing plant? I pinch myself all the time about this because I can't believe I lived to see the day.
Well, it reminds me of a funny story I was telling earlier today. Growing up in college, I wouldn't say I was that rebellious, but I did try cannabis before I discovered its medicinal properties socially from time to time. And on one of those occasions, my mother, wonderful woman, does a lot of great work, pro bono advocacy for victims of sexual violence and such, bless her heart. But she used to come in and would say to us, you got to stop smoking that cannabis in this house because it's illegal. And if you want to do it, you got to change the laws. And just maybe 6 months ago, I was visiting her on her back porch smoking a joint, and she started saying, oh, that's, really smelling up my back porch here. And I said, well, if you want me to stop, you're going to have to change the laws.
I love it. That's a great story. That is a great story. What about that smell, by the way? Smoking it in public is still illegal according to the law. And I'm talking about Massachusetts here, and even in most states, right? So will there ever be a time, it's funny, I should have asked the botanist this, can they grow odor-free weed?
Well, so first, one important clarification, because I think medical patients in Massachusetts will benefit from this. I think it's I'm going to forget. It's 94G13C, I think. But in any event, there is a subsection of the statute that actually allows medical patients to smoke in public anywhere where cigarettes are allowed. And so medical patients in Massachusetts can smoke in public, but those without a medical card can't. As to your question, part of cannabis can be stripped of its smell. The terpenes, obviously you were talking about those last segment, but when you do that, it creates a concentrate, and then you'd be vaping. An odorless cannabis in flower form to be smoked, I perhaps genetically it could be done, but not with the technology now that I know of.
There you go. Well, we all know that technology changes every day. And I remember, as my studio director, Dan French, reminded me that at MJ BizCon last December, we actually interviewed a guy who was growing odorless cannabis from Colombia and Canada. He claimed it was odorless, by the way. There was no demonstration on the floor at the Las Vegas Convention Center, I just want to say. No proof. Hey, as someone who's been around the community now for a number of years, you're still learning. I mean, I'm amazed every time I meet someone or talk with someone about this. They always have something to teach or something to share. If I were to put you on the spot and said, did you know, what would you say? What is it about the cannabis plant that you would share that you think you can stump me on or just enlighten me about?
Oh, that's a unique question. I guess I would say something like, Well, see, it brings me in two different directions, because there's questions about the plant, and then there's questions about the regulations and laws surrounding the plant. If I were going to ask you about the plant, I guess I would say, at what point in the development of the trichome do you know that an outdoor cannabis plant is ready for harvesting?
Okay, first of all, we just played a clip from Andrew Elk, about trichomes. So this is going to be what I would call an educated guess, not a lot of confidence, but I'm going to guess when it starts to flake. No?
No, so it's good guess.
I knew I'd be wrong.
No, good guess. But when you're looking at the your buds as they're about to be ready for harvest, you're going to take a 30x magnifying glass, and if you see them go, and I know I'm going to get this right, I might get it wrong. If you see them go from milky to clear, that is the perfect time to harvest.
And we're right at the harvest time right now, correct? What have you visited any harvest labs or grow facilities to see the action?
You know, a micro business I've seen, but I've never seen a cultivator that's bigger than 5,000 square feet.
There you go. And one of the things we also talked about with Professor Bugbee was the use of solar power. You know, Solar Therapeutics down in Somerset is the only one in the state. And with all the socially responsible capitalism that's going on inside this industry, I really would like to see more solar-powered dispensaries, or at least grow facilities, or at least partially solar-powered. Well, do you think we'll ever see that? And doesn't the state offer incentives for solar-powered? I think they do for domestic use, but not for commercial.
They do, and it's an interesting quirk of the regulations with regards to the Cannabis Control Commission. They encourage people to, I believe, try one type of light that is, like you say, energy rated. I don't know the specific details, but the issue is the commission is very strict with what you can use for your lighting. So although they encourage you to use energy efficient lighting, they don't allow a lot of experimentation, and that slows down the rollout of progressive development technology.
This is probably a loaded question for you because I know you are regularly involved with the commission. They're easy targets to pick on, and they've had an extremely difficult job to create regulations from scratch, or at least use other states' regulations as some guide work. They've now lost a commissioner. What's your opinion of what kind of a job that Steve Hoffman and the other commissioners have done so far up to this point in Massachusetts?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's an important question. I'd say a few pieces of groundwork before diving into it. One would be the recognition that I think each commissioner is different. So Commissioner McBride, Commissioner Title, Chairman Hoffman, Commissioner Flanagan are the remaining commissioners. Like you mentioned, Commissioner K. Doyle just left. I think they're each different and have had different priorities and would measure their own success from the perspective of their different priorities. But that said, there are also universal arbiters or measurements of the success of their ability to implement their mandate per the law. And in terms of that, I will say that I was a big critic, and I still am in many ways, of the failures of the CCC to accomplish some of its mandates. But I've also seen, in particular over the past 8 months, an almost supersonic or exponential increase in the rate of provisional licenses being approved, in the rate of equity licenses being approved, in the willingness of the commission to be bold on things like caregiver access, expanded format for equity delivery, expanded equity periods for those delivery licenses. And so everything that I've seen, for some reason, for a pattern of about 6 to 8 months now, has been moving in a positive direction. And while there's a lot more work to be done, if they continue to approve 60 to 70 provisional licenses per hearing, and if the ratio of equity applicants and disadvantaged business applicants and economic empowerment applicants continues to go up, I'm perfectly content to see them move in that direction.
And I know that it was part of the law was to help those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs to get an opportunity, a leg up, if you will. But we also recognize the realities of regulations, that there's so many layers and what have you. It costs you an arm and a leg just to get to the starting line. I have a friend that runs a dispensary. I won't name him, but it took him quite a few $1 million just to open up the door to his vertical dispensary. And, it's amazing to me. People think that you're in the cannabis business. Oh, my God, you're going to make $1 million. Oh, my God, it's going to be such a big thing. There's so many layers that cut down on those profit margins. I don't know how people are going to actually have a sustainable business. Are you worried about that?
I think it depends on a number of factors. Not every business is the same, which I think we all realize. And, you know, there are different operational license tiers. There are different types of licenses. For context, the Boston Globe last year reported that one group of three medical dispensaries, so one owner, three medical dispensaries, made $90 million in revenue over 12 months. Now, what this recognizes is these people had come to fruition, were open, operational, had developed supply lines, and were at 100% capacity. Recognizing the lag there of 3 to 4 years, I think, is the more crucial insight which you're driving at. That worries me, and it in particular worries me for equity applicants and smaller applicants, because some bigger players, MSOs, great that they want to be in the market, but they can survive that lag time going through the regulatory process by offering returns. It's harder for a smaller company that has to own 51% of itself to qualify for its equity status in the first place to maintain that ownership and attract the funding. So maybe it shows my willingness to be progressive, but I support things like S2650, which would be using some of the cannabis excise tax, which by law every year has to be spent on communities disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs, to actually give loans to equity companies to get through that period.
Yeah, that's been an issue in Massachusetts and has been talked about. The use of those funds have not been going in the direction that they were intended to go, which, by the way, anyone who's been around politics, state politics, that's not surprising, okay? I just want to say, look, there are states like Rhode Island, towns like Fall River. There is such a cash grab in every element at every level, whether it's in politics, not just related to cannabis, but everybody wants to get their piece, okay? And what's lacking is like an overseer, someone to say, no, that's not fair. We need to share. And I know that sounds socialistic, but call me socialistic if you want, because I am a sharer, okay? And I do believe that especially with designated funds that are supposed to get plowed back into the industry, to me, that's almost illegal. It's misappropriation of funds, isn't it?
Well, I think that the way the law was written, and you point out, it's a great article by Naomi Martin in the Boston Globe that really dives into this stuff. Last year, there was $70.6 million in cannabis excise tax. That's a small number compared to what it's going to be in 10 years. But of that $70.6 million, $0 went to those communities. Now, the law has in it a clause that 5 subject areas, including public health, substance abuse prevention, communities disproportionately impacted, have to receive funds. But the executive is the one who decides the budget, in this state, because of the line item veto and things like that. And so not just that, because of the way the budget process works. So the governor has managed to dedicate those resources to important causes, substance abuse, treatment, recovery. It's not to say those are not important, but he did it in a way that was to the exclusion of funding for communities that were harmed by the drug war, and that's a problem.
That is a problem. It's another reason why I'm let's not go there. Okay, but I do want to talk about this issue in particular, and don't know if have you read the book by Bruce Barcott called Weed the People? It's a great book. It was written in 2015, 2016, around the time when Colorado and Washington State were going through their first round of legalization. And Bruce went out with he's from Washington State because he works for Leafly now. He's the editor of Leafly. And he went out with a friend of his, that a lawyer was with the ACLU. And Bruce was not sure which way he was going to vote on adult use recreational in Washington State. And his friend explained to Bruce, he said, look, it's not a drug issue. It's a civil rights issue. And when you look at it that way, and when you look at the statistics that were made public over the last week or so, the Uniform Crime Report out of FBI, that'd be the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a total of 545,602 people were arrested in the U.S. for marijuana-related offenses in 2019, okay? And 495,000 were arrested for violent crimes. As the 92% of that 500,000 total of those who were arrested for possession crimes. Now, to me, that's a perfect example of why it is a civil rights thing, because law enforcement has been profiling black people for decades, okay? And I don't know how many more stats we really need to show this and explain it to people. Why do we have to still explain it to people in 2020? Very frustrating.
Well, I think twofold. One, there are people who, unfortunately, despite the plethora of data that's available, have not taken the time to come to understand the impact that the war on drugs had on minority communities, black and brown communities, Jewish communities, and otherwise. A lot of people don't realize that not only Anslinger at the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the precursor to the DEA, but also Ehrlichman and Nixon would say things openly like, oh, the black people and the Jewish people are using cannabis. Let's develop laws so we can stop them from engaging in civil rights protests by targeting them for nonviolent drug use. And then once you realize that, unfortunately, we've privatized a lot of the prisons in this country, and those privatized prisons on the state level come with contracts where the government agrees to maintain a certain percentage of capacity. And the reality is people from minority communities who possess drugs in a nonviolent capacity are soft targets to fill those quotas. And we've set up this system that incentivizes it. And on top of that, there's another reality, which is even people who know that sometimes undermine the proposals related to equity because it's a threat to their profits. And so those two factors working together create a situation where equity is talked about as a positive, but in reality, when it comes to the lawmaking, you have to keep fighting for it because there's always someone trying to prevent it from being heard or someone who doesn't want to pay attention.
That sounds like the definition of systematic racism, right? It's here. I mean, and by the way, Nixon threw the hippies under the bus too, just for the record, because I remember that quote. Were you around in 1973 by any chance?
No, I have a bit of a compulsion, and I've read the Senate Watergate report, not only from Senator Irving's committee in the summer of '73, but also the final report of the special prosecutor. So I love that time period because I like examining how they caught them.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and that was when I was in high school. I graduated high school in '75. Okay. And we talk about the Waldos, the 420 guys from California, right? And in 1971 is when they started that. That's when they claimed that it was like the first time that they would meet at 420 and all that. It coincides with the first year that I tasted and partaked in that cannabis sativa plant. Now, granted, I was not in high school at the time. I was in 8th grade. But, I claim it as part of my culture, my upbringing. And I, too, was ADHD and I had no idea I was ADHD. And I was using it to hyper focus on schoolwork or driving. I mean, it was just part of my metabolism growing up. And even though I took 10 years off sober, I went back to it medicinally after I started to get my 4 major surgeries in 22 years since I turned 40. But it is an amazing thing to me that it has been around. And this is just my lifetime. I was not around in 1937, okay, just for the record. And the more history you read about that period of time, it's fascinating to me how racism played a huge role in the development of that first law in 1937 that made it illegal. And yet medical doctors in the 1920s wrote 3 million prescriptions for cannabis in the United States of America. And, Mr. Hearst and Mr. DuPont should be ashamed of themselves for what they did to fund Reefer Madness, to get the DEA hired. And it's just a dark mark, a bad mark, if you will, on our history of the United States of America as I get up on my my history major filibuster or whatever I am. I'm preaching about that. But hey, Grant, terrific stuff. What's next for MassCan? Do you want to plug something? What's coming up for you guys?
Well, there's always something going on at MassCan. You were kind enough to mention our virtual Ed Villages earlier. Folks can watch those anytime at facebook.com/MassCan. There's a video archive of the previous 18. And then we normally do one a week. We just had a big virtual event, so we haven't been having as many over the past few weeks, but hopefully those will get up and going. And then there's also, I don't know if it'll be virtual this year or not, but in December, we usually hold what's called the Marijuana Ball, where we try to give back to our volunteers. And hopefully we'll have some news about that, whether it's digital or otherwise, coming out sometime soon.
It's a crazy world right now with the COVID thing. And while I enjoy the Zoom interview, I really do love it when people are still able to come into the studio and we've got just enough room to be 6 to 10 feet apart and still talk. And you have an open invite. I mean, David has raved about you, and I listened to him because he's probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life, outside of the science community of cannabis, of course, because those science directors at the various labs, they're brilliant people. I mean, just way beyond my ability to understand, but we all learn. And isn't that what it's all about now? Isn't it all about educating the public? Oh, I got one for you. One more pet peeve, okay? I'm pretty sure that the Cannabis Control Commission has a $250,000 ad budget for public service announcements. And they put out those animated messaging that I thought was so condescending and so pathetic, it really bothered me. Now, I've been railing about a campaign for public service announcements that actually explain the benefits and the responsible use of cannabis, and I have yet to see that. Grant, will we ever see a public service campaign that reflects that?
Well, to circle back to the piece of advice I gave my mom, you have to change the law. And I don't think it will surprise you to learn that the reason that public awareness campaign from the CCC is that way is the text and the style is in the text of the law, dictating to them how they have to run their advertisements around public safety. Now, the reason for that is that the people who wrote the law, a majority of them on the Compromise Committee were fighting for the right thing, but there were a lot of prohibitionists. Another thing you might realize is currently the 3 appointing authorities, the people who choose who goes on the Cannabis Commission, are the governor, the treasurer, the attorney general. All of those people voted against Question 4 in 2016. So I think there is going to be a bit of a lag, maybe 5 to 10 years, before we see the messaging surrounding cannabis from our government line up with where the voters want our government to be on that messaging.
Well, there you go. That's a great way to end it, Grant. And that's very insightful. And I really appreciate that because I want to be part of that in some capacity. And if there's anything I can do to help move that forward, other than vote, which I do in my local, in my state, and I actually voted today. And just for the record, that's what we push. We want everybody to vote. I would love to see this election have the most votes ever cast in a election in the last 63 years of my lifetime. To me, no matter what the result is, that would be the biggest win, that we exercised our right to vote. And that is so, so important. And it's also something I think both sides agree on, which is such a rarity these days.
Well, it is interesting. I tend to agree with your optimism. I do think people are engaged, and I do think shows like this and an emphasis on education is what keeps people engaged. So I'm grateful to have been able to come on, and I hope we'll get to do it again.
Yes, please do. You have an open invite out to our studio out here in Wellesley on Route 9. So thank you again, Grant Smith Ellis. We look forward to seeing your reports online and hearing more about what MassCan is doing out there. Thank you again.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too. So that was great. We're 2 for 2 in interviews right now, I just want to say. Before we go to line up our next interview, and I do believe I can play video before or when a Zoom call comes in. This is all new challenges to us. I'm going to try and get to the right one to introduce our pal, Andrew. I know I got it written down. I just got to find my notes. It's okay. You know, it's not like I'm reading off a teleprompter. Lord knows I miss those days. So this is Andrew Elk from Rev Clinics talking about the combustion of the cannabis weed in either a pipe, a joint, or he also compares it to vaping. Listen to what he had to say.
Combustion is hot smoke in our throat and lungs.
Yeah.
Nobody likes it. That's why we add ice. That's why we add water.
Gotcha.
Now, vaping, the idea of we're actually not combusting when we're vaping. So
Right, you get right up to that point.
Exactly.
Right?
We're basically using electronic means, basically an oven. We have a tiny oven space, just like the oven in your kitchen, and that's heating up our flour or our concentrate material to the exact temperature where THC starts to float off of the physical material, whether that's plant or whether that's shatter, wax, butter, what have you. So you reach that ideal temperature range, and then you're exactly like you're saying. So you're just inhaling the vapor floating off that material, and that's usually at between 300 and 400 degrees. If you are going for low temperature dabbing, it's sometimes called. It's like the lit tip of a joint, the lit tip of a cigarette is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
So that was Andrew Elk from a show that we recorded about a week ago. I don't think, you know what, we live streamed. I don't even know how to talk about this. We recorded it, we live streamed it, we had it live in studio. It's the best of content. You know, back in the day, it was either live TV or it was recorded TV. And now it's completely different, but it is what it is. I've always said if it looks like TV, sounds like TV, it's TV. So that's what we're doing. We're making television content, okay? That's what we're doing here on Cannabis Chat. I can give a plug for Friday afternoon on Cannabis Chat. David Rabinovitz from MassCan will be joining us. I just heard the ding dong, which means that Nurse Mark is going to be joining us momentarily. And I think I actually see him. And that's a good sign because we see him, and that means we can actually talk to him too. Hello, Mark Worcester. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy Young, I'm doing well, thanks.
Hey, twice in 1 week. I love that. You know.
Hey, what are the odds? I'm a lucky guy, right?
Well, I like to fix those odds so I can continue to connect with good people like yourself. First of all, Mark, you know, one thing I don't know about you, and even though I did a little bit more research on you, where are you from originally?
I am from a town 20 miles south of Boston, so I'm a Massachusetts boy, born and bred.
And you're not going to enlighten us on that town?
Yeah, the little town called Easton.
Easton, of course. I know Easton.
Yeah, Stonehill College.
In fact, pretty sure that a great member of the Patriots from the past, of course it has something to do with sports,
Of course.
Jim Bowman, long time, I was a safety for the Patriots. He lives in Easton. Do you know him at all?
You know what? We have not met.
Well,
and I'm surprised because I literally spent 56 years in the town.
And did you ever know, I think there was a guidance counselor named Stuart Silverman. Did you ever know him in the schools?
That name is awfully familiar.
Yeah. So that's a guy I grew up with in the Newton area.
Is that right?
Yeah. So there you go. I love that, what is it, 5 separations or whatever.
Yeah. Six separations, right?
Right. And cannabis is a small world to begin with, right?
It is. It really is. You never know who you're going to meet.
That's right. Well, now that we've met, I'd like to get into some pretty good talk here because, first of all, fascinated with your own personal story. I did watch your video about what you are now considered to, this is your life passion. You want to create a community that accepts gender equality, economic opportunity for everybody, and sustainable living.
Yeah.
How'd I do?
You did well.
Thank you very much.
You did well, Jimmy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You can call me, this is Professor Weed Wednesdays. So we want to educate our public a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you got involved with the Green Nurse Group and our pal, Sherry Tutkus.
Oh, Sherry Tutkus. She is the best.
She is.
Yeah. You know, it's a really strange story because I was cannabis agnostic forever and ever and ever. I went into the Marine Corps when I was 17, and that was the end of my cannabis use. And yeah, so, you know, I didn't care if anybody else used it. I just didn't use it. Right. And I owned a tech company for 30 years, wasn't even in the healthcare space. And at the end of my career in that tech company, just before I sold it, I went to nursing school nights and weekends because I had time on my hands, and I got to fill up my time, Jimmy.
Right.
So I became a nurse running the other company, sold the other company, had the nursing degree, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, to be honest with you. I worked in long-term care for a little bit, and then I met a person that had a CBD company, and I had never heard of CBD. I'd never heard really, cannabis, as far as I knew, was just for getting high. That's what people used it for.
Right.
And the more I dove into it, the more I was amazed about what the possibilities are for healing with this plant. And so the deeper I got, the more I knew that this was the path that my nursing career would take. And so you said it's a small world, right? Sherry and I met at a conference of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, and we immediately became fast friends. And then, over time, she's in Massachusetts, I was in Massachusetts, over time, we got to know each other better and better and better. And then we have just embarked on this new thing together in the Green Nurse.
Well, we love that. And I think one of her sayings is be all you can be, or be your best.
Live your best life.
Be your best, right. Live your best life. That's her thing. And I love that about Sherry. I mean, it was definitely
she's amazing.
When we first, I know exactly when I met her, who introduced us. And it's one of those moments you just remember when you meet really good people. And I'm just thrilled. It does look like we are going to work together in some capacity.
Yeah,
and we're going
exciting.
to air your show on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. We're going to try and air Sherry's show on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. We're going to try and make it all happen so that we can share the education and share the love. Share the love with the cannabis community.
That's right.
It says here, now, do you have a Master of Science in Cannabis Science and Therapeutics? Or are you still studying that?
I'm halfway through, more than halfway through. So I'll graduate in May of 2021 with a master's in medical cannabis science and therapeutics. And it's the first master's program in the country specific to cannabis. And there's 150 students, and it's at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, which is a legit, it's the fourth oldest school of pharmacy in the country, Jimmy. Yeah. So it's a legit degree. Who knew? I'd have, I go from being agnostic to having a master's degree in cannabis science.
Hey,
craziest
that's right.
things happen.
And I think it's great that the higher educational community, right? It's ridiculous. You can't get away from the puns. You just can't. All right.
You can't. They're built in everywhere.
So the higher education community starting to embrace cannabis because of the depth of the knowledge and the science and the research and the
science
math.
And research that's been done. It's been studied for, as long as it's been illegal, as long as it's been studied. Not here in the United States as much, but it has been studied. There is so much data out there. And, being a nurse, I'm trained to be skeptical of anything that comes out, right? It's just how we're trained in the medical community to always look at it with skepticism. And so we look for evidence, right? The more you look, the more you find the evidence that this is just such a powerful and safe way to heal people.
That's right. And earlier in this show, we talked to Professor Bruce Bugbee from Utah State, who is I would call him an internationally renowned scientist because he's been working on this since 1981. And he understands the power of the medicine and how important it is to grow it and how to dictate the DNA of the plant. And
it's science, man.
I told him, I said, my science requirement at Tufts University was astronomy. Okay, it just was. It was
and a worthy one it is.
That's right. I think I even took it pass fail just to make sure I got through it. All right. Because I just, chemistry and biology, as soon as I had to dissect that frog in 10th grade in high school, I was done. I was like, no, I'm done. This is not something I'm interested in.
It is science.
Yeah.
And even the grow. I went to Kentucky to a hemp growers association meeting a couple of years ago because I was looking into growing. And I just had no idea how much this is all science-based. I mean, I got in that room and it was amazing what these farmers were talking about as far as how to grow hemp. And they even admitted, hey, we're 100 years behind corn and wheat. Like we've got a long way to catch up in the genomics and the science behind it. It was amazing.
It still is. And I think when we first talked, the word fascinating drives a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs. It drives scientists. It drives research. It drives journalists or ex-journalists, talk show hosts, whatever the hell you want to call them now. I am fascinated with the amount of knowledge and information that's already out there. And more importantly, if we move forward like I'm hoping we will in a few months, and we can open up that research capacity.
Right.
You know, that's where so many jobs are going to be created, because I really do believe that grant money will become available readily for cannabis research, as opposed to what they have to go through now, which is practically every time they got to go to the Supreme Court to ask for $5.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful because, of course, you know, the purse strings are held by government agencies that don't necessarily believe in the positive nature of the cannabis plant.
Right. That's why there's been 30,000 studies by the substance abuse community trying to find what's wrong with this thing.
I know. And every one of them, believe me, I've read most of them. I'm reading, you know, the latest ones now, and all of them say may have a detrimental effect. It never says we've conclusively proven. No, they can't.
No.
It's a may have. Guess what? That may have means that it may have positive qualities as well.
Well, how about may is less than probably? So, you know, right?
Right.
You know, so anyway, I find I find it. How many people have you met or talked to that use that phrase, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life?
Oh my gosh, Jimmy, it's just, you know, that was early on. That was one of the things that really just astounded me, is when we'd get feedback from people who had used my former partner's products. They would come back and say, hey, you know, this just literally has changed the course of my life. I had a girl on my podcast last night, a fellow student at University of Maryland, and a nurse who has MS, and she's in her early 30s. And, you know, she suffered a lot, and she was on 22 medications, Jimmy. She's now on none.
Wow.
She is on cannabis as a medication. And that literally took away 22 medications. And I'm talking strong medications. When you have MS, you know, you're working with some pretty hefty stuff that have a lot of side effects.
Right. You know, whenever I talk with the members of the medical community, I always talk about the philosophies of Western medicine versus the philosophies of Eastern medicine.
Right.
Where Western medicine goes after the symptoms and Eastern medicine goes after the cause. Is that accurate?
I would equate that. Yeah, I would say that's pretty spot on.
And here's a plant that God put on this earth to help both sides, I just want to say. Yeah. And now I'm finding out about new discoveries with, we talked to a guy last week who's got this fungi that you can put into it's an organic, you put it into the cannabis plant, and it increases the flower, the potency of it by like 200%.
I met that guy in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Wait, are you talking about Dozy?
In a medical cannabis conference. I swear it was the same guy. And because now that you say it, he had this fungi that literally would increase the yield astronomically.
Right. Dozy Mabonu is the man. He's out of Philadelphia.
Oh man, there's that small world.
It is a small world. Well, you know what? And I'm not even surprised anymore, right?
No.
Because I'm now talking to so many people. We're doing 5 shows a week now, and you just exponentially meet more people. Hey, I got to introduce you to this guy. Oh, you got to meet so and so. Oh, you got to talk to this guy. And all I'm doing is talking to people, which is what I like to do anyway. So you know, certainly a labor of love.
It's a great life, man.
one of the things that hasn't been asked of you, and I'm sure it's a cliche question that's asked all the time, so I left it till I ran out of things to say. No, till now. Okay. You were a Marine at 17.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what year that was, nor do I really care. It's not really. That's really not important.
Maybe.
Many people that go into the military, when they get out of the military, they suffer from PTSD. There's quite a few veterans out there. They go to the VA, they get put on opioids, and then you know they've used cannabis to get off them. Okay, I've heard this story.
Yeah.
Now you're going into a profession. You've done your business thing. You've sold your business, and you go into nursing. Now, come on, Marines, tough guys. And I understand you're big on gender equality, as am I. I totally get it.
I am.
Right?
Oh, I am.
So, Marine, nurse, are you getting any crap from friends?
Oh, yeah, of course. I have my whole life, though, Jimmy. You know, 1998, I went on a week-long yoga retreat because a therapist told me it would be a good thing for me to decrease my stress.
Yeah.
And at the time, I owed the Bank of America a ton of money, and they were just crushing me, right? So I have a little stress. I went on that retreat and I came back and immediately became a certified yoga instructor. So my friends are not surprised at this point by the things that I do.
There's nothing wrong with yoga. I do 10 to 12 poses, let's just say, in a day every morning because otherwise I wake up in pain, and I've got a $16,000 hot tub in my backyard, I might add. So, needless to say,
if I ever get your address, you're going to look out and find me in that tub, Jimmy.
And by the way, I will tell you this, and I'm going to go on it's unlocked in my backyard. So, you know what? Have a blast in it. I have two rules. And by the way, this is a mature audience, so I could say these two rules. Bathing suits must be worn.
Yeah.
And no exchange of fluids, please, in my tub. Okay. Those are the only two rules.
Yeah, I know. Everybody has those rules. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh.
Nurse Mark, do you have a product? Do you have a product line that was talked about on your website? Tell me a little about the product line.
I do. I have a CBD product line because, when I started 3 years ago in the industry, I started in the CBD at the side of the house. And I found that it was just really difficult for people to find solid products. So I created a product line, and so I have a product line, and we're formulating right now a product line for the green nurse because we have, the more that we've learned, the more specific we are with our intent on products. So we're doing that as well.
Yeah, and cannabinoid medicine is the theme of our Monday show, but because that education overlaps everything for the most part, whether it's business education or pharmaceutical education or just learning about the product itself. There's a lot of overlap, let's just say.
I think, Sherry and I say it doesn't matter if you're using it recreationally or in the medical programs, you're still using it as medicine. I don't care.
Right. And you know what? I'll never forget when my then 15-year-old, who's now a 30-year-old electrician in North Carolina, was going through my pockets at a Harlem Globetrotters game that we were at, and he came up with my one-hitter. And, of course, I had to explain to him that that's Daddy's medicine, okay?
Yes.
I've used it medicinally. This is how I use it, and I still preach responsible use. And we'll continue to do that. So
of course.
And there are plenty of people out there that go into this is one of the things that the powers that be that are involved with the laws and the rules can't quite grasp. They think, recreationally, that means you're just out there becoming a stoner. No, at all. It just means you don't let it take over your life. Because if you use it in small quantities to balance your endocannabinoid system, to balance your metabolism.
Music to my ears, my man.
Right? I mean,
yes.
And I am going to be leaving my body to science because no one else is going to want it. So
I'm getting to that point now, I think. I'm going to fill out the paperwork.
Right. Well, now that I know how old you are let's go back to some of the products for a second.
Sure.
There are topicals, and then there are tinctures.
Tinctures, ingestibles and topicals,
Right, and some edibles that are out there too.
Yeah.
The testing of these products is still being debated everywhere. Okay.
It's still an issue.
It's still an issue because, as I preach on this show, please don't buy CBD products at convenience stores or gas stations. Okay.
And
if this is
people
truly
too.
a medicine and you want to self-medicate, you need to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting. Right, Mark?
Listen, you want to get what you pay for. It's not cheap. And, you know, the reason is that there's a lot of work involved in making the products. There really is.
Absolutely.
And we still don't have enough of a grow. So, yeah, I mean, economics provides for that. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And hey,
so testing is imperative. You're right.
Can I look at him over here now? Oh, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, what's up? Hang on a second. I have to talk with my studio director because we don't have an IFB system, you know, like real television. You know what I mean? Yes, Dan.
Jimmy, this is beautiful.
Okay, let's talk about the dosing because everybody has to have a different dose because it affects everybody differently, right, Mark?
Everybody's receptor count is different. It changes over the course of your life. It changes according to what's going on in your body. Yeah.
Will we ever develop a test to check on our endocannabinoid system and our levels or anything like that? Do you see that might be coming down the line in 10 years? I mean, as opposed to where
I'm
we're
sure
at now.
people are working on it, Jimmy, because it would be a great tool to have, you know, to really be able to judge the level of the health of your endocannabinoid system. But honestly, I think it's so complex that it would be mind-boggling to try to understand how you would do that. Really.
So the general rule of thumb, and Sherry's the one who taught me this, right? You start low and you go slow, and that's
which is a problem for people.
Right, and that's the THC and CBD blend. What is your opinion about the entourage effect?
Okay, so the entourage effect is a real phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as people know, and I'm sure you've had tons of people on the show that have talked about what it is, you know, it's all of the different chemical components in the cannabis plant working together sort of as lock and key.
Right.
They don't know. Now, science, very, very, you know, renowned scientists are doing studies on this, and they admit that it is a true phenomenon. And they will admit they just don't know what it is. I just read a study that was trying to elucidate if what effect terpenes had. And they determined that in this particular study that they couldn't figure out what the terpenes were doing or if they were working at the level of the CB1, CB2 receptors. That's what the study was trying to do. And they figured out that they weren't, except one. Beta caryophyllene was working like CBD at the same receptor site. So we're early on, man. There is an entourage effect. We don't fully understand what it's all about, but you know,
there'll be somebody
safety profile.
Right. There'll be somebody out there that'll earn their PhD in the endocannabinoid system.
Totally.
Right. In the next few years. And you know, schools like the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, I would think.
Yeah.
We know of the Cleveland School of Cannabis that has a 156-hour set of courses, a campus in Cleveland. They also have an online. Last week, I talked with Max Simon, who's the founder of greenflower.com, green-flower.com, a site that I discovered when I first got my medical card. And I watched at least 100 videos on that site before YouTube took them down, which is an interesting story. Yeah.
Of course they did.
Well, Max called it, he said, you know what? It was an act of censorship. And he's right. It also, I think, had a lot to do with the fact that Jeff Sessions got that Cole memo rescinded and corporate America.
Where's Jeff now? Does anybody know?
I think he's got COVID. Anyway.
At least he's not sitting where he was. Yeah, you're right.
That's right. And by the way, the guy they replaced him with is no bargain either, let's just say. But I digress. And I don't like to digress into politics because it's a really nasty, nasty time in our world right now.
It always is.
If you could give me one piece of advice, let's just say I'm a newbie. I've never tried it. I don't know anything about it. What would be a piece of advice for someone that is in their 50s, okay, and suffers from, let's talk sleep, because we all know that sleep is probably one of the biggest issues in America, right?
And the older you get, the more it is an issue. Yes.
But I got to tell you, the older I get, the less sleep I need. Although I'm a champion napper, so it works.
See, yeah,
it works pretty well for me.
I agree.
What piece of advice would you give a 50-year-old? Where would they go? Obviously, they can go to the nursemark.com website.
They go,
right?
yeah, they go to thegreennurse.com. You know, I really think that if you're gonna effectively utilize it, you really should have somebody who's gonna coach you on that. Somebody who has that education and really can help you do it, because like you said, everybody's different. They need a different amount to have the effect that they want, and they need different products, like a different strain or different route of administration. And the problem is, from my standpoint, people try it and they say, it doesn't work for me, and they never use it again. And that's a damn shame, because it's not that simple. And once you get the product that works for you, life changes.
It changes your life. That's a perfect way to end this, Nurse Mark. Hey, I'm psyched. First of all, I'm looking forward to seeing a full show. I've only seen clips, but I'm looking forward to that. Please send my love to Sherry. I believe she has her show tonight. Is it a Wednesday night?
She does.
7 o'clock?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
8 o'clock?
And we do ours on Thursday nights. So she's doing hers tonight.
At the Green Nurse Facebook page?
Yeah.
Green Nurse Facebook page.
Green Nurse Facebook page, streaming out there, yeah.
And you can find it on Facebook, and we know Nurse Mark is on there as well, so we look forward to seeing you again, man. Can't wait for you to get back to Massachusetts, but please wait until the weather changes. I'll see you next June.
My friend.
Okay, I'll see you next June. Fair enough?
All right, Jimmy. Thanks.
All right, take care. That is
Appreciate
Nurse
it.
Mark Worcester. NurseMark.com is where you'll find him. You'll also find his podcast and shows coming to Pro Cannabis Media in the very near future. Well, that's going to wrap it up here once again for another edition of Cannabis Chat. For my staff, Isabel Turner, Dan French, Karen Solomon out there in the left coast of California, Sarah Galt, and a new member of our team, David Monty. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again live in studio Friday at 4. Oh, hey, everybody. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Chat, our live stream from our studios here just out of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Pro Cannabis Media is the parent company, if you will, of our production group and our group of like-minded internet sites. So the name of this show is Cannabis Chat. However, because we do this 3 days a week, we wanted to differentiate between the Monday show, the Wednesday show, and the Friday show. So on Mondays, we do cannabinoid medicine, Medicinal Mondays. Wednesday, we call it Professor Weed Wednesdays because we actually educate and talk with educators and people who can educate our audience about cannabis. And then on Fridays, we do the Green Rush with David Rabinovitz, the business of cannabis. So there are 3 separate entities. And of course, we also have sometimes very special in-studio guests, but we also do live Zoomed interviews that we've lined up, and we have a few lined up a little bit later on, in about 30 minutes or so. We'll talk to a professor of culinary arts from the Cleveland School of Cannabis. Her name is Linda Berry. She'll be joining us in about 30 minutes. At the top of the hour, in about 60 minutes, Rob Mejia, who is not only a professor at Stockton University, but he also has an online course, and it's called Our Community Harvest Online Courses, and he's the brains behind that operation. And I actually guest taught, I don't even know, I was a guest in his class on Monday of this week. So we'll get his review on how I did with my little PowerPoint and videos and using Zoom and all that neat stuff. And then at 5:30, we have a very special guest. In fact, I'm not even going to tell you who it is because it's a special guest. And for those of you out there who actually follow us and know, we've got a team of people who support what we're doing here at Pro Cannabis Media, help us out on the production side, on the business side, on the marketing side. And let's just say one of our team is going to be calling in and talking with us, because we are going to be talking about cooking with cannabis with a professional chef. Her name is Sam Cantor, and she's with us now, and her company is called Dinner at Mary's.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam, for coming in.
Absolutely.
How are you? We are socially distanced for obvious reasons.
Yes, we are.
You know, back in the day, we used to want the news anchors to be tight and close so it looked like a team, and now you're seeing everybody separated for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your company and your background, because how in the world did you get into cooking with cannabis?
So I'm technically I'm not the chef. I do have a chef that I work with.
Yep.
So I'm the business owner. But Dinner at Mary's is the second cannabis events company that I've started, and I come from an events background, so that's how I got into the events world in general. I moved more into cannabis based on my personal use. So I think a lot of people find it interesting that I have used cannabis in my everyday life. So it's been a big part of my events company that I've had for 7 years, but really on the back end. Dinner at Mary's is bringing it to the forefront. So really incorporating it into, we do events, catering, and now meal kits.
What was the event group that you worked with before you got into the Cannabis Dinners?
I worked with Eat Sacrilegious originally.
I know that group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you've spoken with David.
Right. That's why I know the group.
Yeah.
That's right. And in fact, during our conversation over the next couple hours, we'll be interspersing it with some clips that we did with David from a show that we did in, let's just say 2019, because if I could try to remember when it was, I'm going to guess October maybe. Dan McCarthy was on that show with us. Dan is also a friend of the program.
Yep.
He's now working with Canna Provisions out in Lee, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And I actually am a satisfied customer. I was out in the Lenox area this past weekend and decided to go through that experience.
Right. Yeah, I love Dan. I've known him for a very long time.
And everybody seems to know Dan McCarthy, which
Yep.
is great. I can't wait to actually get him to actually do his own show.
Yeah,
Because if there's one
absolutely.
person that I've met that deserves his own show is
Yeah.
Dan McCarthy, right?
Yes.
And he's a lot of fun. And of course, Eric Williams is one of the owners out there at Canna Provisions in Lee. And he did the first ever In the Weeds podcast with me in this building in March, April of 2018. So we've been doing this for a while.
Nice.
So you went from Eat Sacrilegious to Dinner, and you are the business owner. So who is your chef? If you're not the one in the kitchen.
I'm not the chef. Nick Escoto is the chef that I work with. So he's my chef partner. He's amazing, and the meal kit idea was from him, which has really been our pivot.
Tell us a little bit about the meal kit thing. I've seen some images of it. So
so we started doing 3-course high-end
private dinners.
Well, we do private dinners, but the meal kits are a high-end Blue Apron, if you will.
Okay.
So it's really bringing a restaurant dining experience into your home. And then there's an optional 20 milligram infused oil gift that you can incorporate into the recipe. Yeah, and they've been great. I mean, they've been great during COVID. I think that it's exactly what people are looking for when they're not comfortable dining out. They're bringing things into their home, and then the cannabis is really elevating the experience.
Elevating the experience. There's
Yeah.
so many puns and plays on words
Yes.
in this industry. We
Yes,
love
there
doing
are.
that. Explain to me, you mentioned the 20 milligram oil.
Oil, yeah. We do an infused olive oil.
Now, how do you, and I've talked with mass cannabis chefs before, Joe
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, I've talked with David. I guess the biggest question is, and now this was what I found fascinating, is you actually talk to the people who you're cooking for at private parties
Yep.
specifically, right?
Yes.
To find out what their knowledge is, experience is, because as we know, everybody has a different reaction to this
Yes,
stuff. Everybody has a different endocannabinoid system, which is tied to our neurotransmitters and all this neat stuff that we've learned through science and research that has actually moved the needle to get us to this point where we can actually talk about cannabis infused foods, because we do know there are still some challenges that this is still a federally illegal substance.
Right.
And the amazing thing to me on so many fronts that it is part of our political debate these days, because everything seems to evolve around politics.
It really does. I know.
Over the next couple of weeks. And I do have a few news items that I might intersperse about this, because sure enough, there was another news item regarding cannabis that broke today with our current POTUS. And I understand that one of the states, Mississippi, has it on the ballot and for adult use legalization. And I believe one side was actually quoting the current POTUS about how he feels about medical marijuana,
right,
and incorporating that into their campaign. And it got to be a little dicey, and I believe there was a cease and desist involved. And it seems wherever our POTUS goes, controversy is sure to follow. Let's just leave it at that
that's for sure,
at this
yeah.
point, because I'm trying to be a little bit more balanced since I've already voted. Okay, so there you go.
I didn't vote yet, but I think you can imagine which direction I'm voting.
I'm sure you're from the Massachusetts area,
I am.
and it's the nature of the beast. When did you first realize that, you know what, we could make a business out of this? We could create. What I'm looking for now is, how'd you come up with the model? I guess because the private dinners has been going on for quite a while now,
Yep.
but here you guys have taken it into more of a online ordering service.
Yes. So, I mean, we still do private catering events, have one tomorrow, but we really shifted, and I mean, this was, really Nick's concept that he came up with, which I vetoed originally,
Okay.
which he likes to bring up. But
Of course he does.
Yes, but I always give him credit for this idea, because he came up with the concept, and some other people are doing meal kits. I feel like I don't want to say lucky, because I think we did it correctly, but they worked really well from the beginning when we conceptualized it. So we decided, it helps with the legality. So we're talking about putting cannabis into food is still, it's not an FDA-approved food additive. It's, there's a challenge there. We are getting around that by not putting the cannabis into the food. So this is actually a much more legal aspect.
Oh, so you're cooking, and then you've got the oil.
Right. For the meal kits, the oil is totally separate. You're in your own home, you're adding that oil if you want to.
Gotcha.
To the food. It's not something that we're doing.
Gotcha.
So as far as legality goes, that definitely helps.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, when we're providing that gift, and then it's separated, which also makes the gifting much simpler and much more straightforward.
Right.
There are plenty of people that make the meal kits without cannabis.
Right, which is what I think Joe Nelson does with mass cannabis chefs, is he asks the people, okay, how many, and then he actually infuses the meal with it in it and then serves it.
Yes,
Yeah.
which we do for on-site catering events as well.
Gotcha.
That there is some gray area when it comes to that,
Yeah.
because
Well,
we're putting it in, obviously.
Gray area. I learned all about that gray area in the seed industry today. I had no idea how much of a market there was with seeds, and I learned that too, which is what I love to do. I just like finding out about how people are carving out their own little niche in this industry. And because it's still a challenge on the federal legal side, there's always lawyers involved. You're always talking and getting advice. How can we do this best? I'm guessing you got legal advice, right? Right?
Yeah, we've gotten advice from a lot of people, and a lot of unsolicited advice, which I've been getting recently, which I think is interesting, because we've really blown up recently. We had a Globe article, and a lot more people are finding out about the meal kits, which is great. It's kind of hilarious to me. Some people will just tell you what to do. And I'm like, I didn't ask. It's kind of wild. It's kind of wild.
When you say that, could you give me an anecdotal thing, perhaps without identifying who it might be?
Sure. I mean, there are people that are, telling us what kind of meals we should be offering, what dietary restrictions are important, which of course and a lot of these things we take into account and care about. And I appreciate feedback. And I think feedback is important when people are like, this would be great, I'd be interested in this, versus like, you should be doing it this way. And I'm like, well, if I should be doing it that way, maybe you should do it. Like, I just find it kind of interesting when it's unsolicited advice, like on how we're doing things. And I think we're doing things in a really great way right now, and we always are trying to improve and want updates and love feedback. I always ask for feedback. But yeah, it's interesting how some people go about that.
Well, of course they do. Everybody's an expert.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yes.
In whatever the
Everybody
world
knows
they're
what
in,
they're
everybody's an expert. Okay. Let's go back to the 20 milligrams of oil that you share. I learned about decarboxylation.
Yes.
And I tried to say that word at least once a show, just so it.
Just make it short and say decarb.
Decarb. Oh yeah, decarb. Because
yeah.
you've got to take the flower, the bud, and then turn it into a product that can be infused in foods. And of course, we're seeing the emergence of the infused beverage industry starting too.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the oil. First of all, for the record, I take a CBD oil dropper every morning with my turmeric. Is it turmeric? Turmeric?
Turmeric.
Turmeric.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. It's that orange goo.
Yep.
And I have it in liquid form, and then I put a little oil in it, take my shot every morning for my arthritis and inflammation that I have.
And it helps.
I will tell you this. I don't notice my pain. I don't notice my pain as much during the day or at night when I do take it.
Yeah.
When I miss a day or two, I notice that my hands are aching.
Right.
So there is absolutely a correlation between that, which is, again, this goes to the whole argument about how it can enhance your life, how it can improve your life.
Right.
And it sounds like you are a regular, someone who enjoys it,
Absolutely.
and medicinally and or for recreation. I mean, there is that fine line, I believe.
It's a very fine line. I am a medical patient.
Yep, me too.
However, I think it's really interesting, like, you use CBD, I don't. For me, I'm a THC girl, and I feel like THC gets a bad rap in the medicinal world and thinks that, like, CBD is, for medicine and THC is for getting high, and I don't agree with that.
No,
at all.
no.
I think there's a lot of medical benefits to THC as well.
And I'm sure you're well versed on the Entourage Effect.
Yeah.
How the CBD really needs
Right.
help from the THC
Yeah,
to maximize
the
its.
two together work really well. Yes.
Right. And as a medicinal patient, you know that there are strains out there that are 2 to 1, 1 to 1, and all that. And I literally try different things because
gotta see what works for you.
It's really about when you deal with chronic pain, trying to explain what that's like to others is very difficult because your mind is very powerful and your mind controls your pain receptors. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of the topical products out there, a lot of people think, oh, you just rub it on and it feels better. Well, that's great. And then, of course, you talk to doctors and go, well, there's no research on this. And I go, well, let me tell you something. As someone who gets inflamed joints, if I'm going to rub something on and you're telling me it's a placebo and it takes my pain away, I could care less.
It still works. So, yeah.
It still works, right? Yeah. It does the trick. When you give the oils to others and you say that it's 20 milligrams, do you give them any marching orders on it? Like, don't put all 20 milligrams in this dish.
Yes. So we give really specific instructions and we give recommendations, but also kind of walk people through it. So on the recipe, we're explaining, yes, if you chose to include the gift, it's 20 milligrams. It's designed for 2 guests, so it's designed for 10 milligrams a person. Yeah. But if you're not familiar or use cannabis a lot, we recommend a lower dose and starting with 5 milligrams a person. So there are typically 3 places in the recipe that you can add this oil. And we also give instructions on how long it takes. So keeping in mind, it can take up to 2 hours. Start low and slow. So all those instructions are included in the recipe. But there are 3 different places that you can add it, not add it. So it's really up to you. Our entire company is based on a dosage control model. there are so many people I think that were been scared away from edibles, scared away from cannabis in general, just from having too much. I think it's
one bad experience.
One bad experience.
And
I hear
everybody
all the
has
time.
the edible experience that they
Yes,
overdid.
Yes, they, the brownie in college, and we'll never do it again. So we bring a lot of people back to cannabis. So we
Okay.
certainly try to bring new people into it that haven't tried it, but
Yep.
a lot of our customers are people that used to use cannabis or have in the past and kind of got scared away from it, and now we're kind of hand-holding them back into it and
Right.
making it accessible. So 5 milligrams is what we typically recommend if they're not super experienced, seeing how that feels, and you have the option of putting it into any of the dishes or not. And again, it's 3 courses. That's why it's, there's a place in each course to add it. For example, I make the meal kits every week, and I put the cannabis into the first 2 courses. And then if I want to eat the dessert, I eat the dessert later once I feel the effects. And then I don't need to put it in. So that's a great way to do it.
Right.
I highly recommend that.
And it makes perfect sense because the munchies, everybody thinks that just because you're smoking weed, you're immediately going to get the munchies and all this. And you don't immediately, right? I mean,
no, not necessarily. I mean, there's sometimes there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. But yeah. I mean, yes, you might enjoy the dessert more later, an hour or so after
That's
you
right.
eat.
And I have a sweet
at the
tooth
entrance.
too, so
The desserts are great, and I always tell Nick, I'm like, you don't know how good your desserts are. Like he builds off of classic recipes. I think he doesn't give himself enough credit. But
What's his background? Did he go to culinary school?
he went to culinary school.
Which one? Do we know which one?
He went to Cambridge Institute.
Okay.
And he actually, before COVID, was teaching cooking classes there as
Mhm.
well. He's worked at a bunch of restaurants, and we're really lucky to have him. He's been great.
It's funny. One of the interviews I got to do a few months ago at this point was Jamie Pearson.
Mm-hmm.
She's the CEO of Bang Chocolate, BHANG. It's the #1 edible chocolate in Canada.
Nice.
And she's a great success story. And it was featured in the Jim Belushi show, the Grown Belushi show, I might add. But the way she started was a chocolatier. And you know how chocolatiers are, how good they are.
Yeah.
I believe the chocolatier found her and said, hey, if you ever want to do anything, I'm more than willing to add THC into my chocolates and turn them into edible products. And that's kind of how her company started. And, I think I love the entrepreneurial spirit. And this is truly feeding it in the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I totally love that. Another thing that we're doing, it's almost 4:20, so I want to set up our 4:20 break. Couple of things. We have our chat room open, and I'm going to challenge those who might be out there watching. Is there something different about our set or something different that we might be introducing here today for the first time? Let's see how observant people are. And if you do come up with something, we will take your information. And you know what? We could talk we'll talk in a break, but maybe there's a way that we could keep promoting you guys in exchange for like a gift of a percentage off a dinner at Mary's or something like that. Because this is definitely, we want to start engaging with our audience anyway. And this is a good way to do it. But since it's coming up, it is 4:20. Everyone in the cannabis community understands the 420 is the code. Like it might be time to actually go out and catch a buzz because it all started at San Rafael High School in California in 1971. A group of guys, they called themselves the Waldos. They would meet at the Louis Pasteur statue across the street from their high school to catch a buzz. Now, law enforcement, being the law enforcers that they are, picked up on the fact that it was at 420. They actually started using 420 as a code themselves. Public consumption of cannabis going on at the corner of Vine and Main. Check it out, 420. And it already became part of the whole cannabis culture, and now it's celebrated by the community. And it is a time to actually go out and step out and take a break and enjoy. It's almost near the end of the day and all that. So every 420 on our shows, we take a break, a little bit different. We let Jonathan Edwards play the song Shanty. And the reason why I have this as part of this whole thing that we're doing is Shanty was our version of 420, or my version of 420 growing up in the greater Boston area, listening to an AM station named WCAS. It was a daytimer, 7:40 AM. And guess what they played on the radio? They played shanty on the radio. When we heard it, it was another excuse for us to step outside and partake, if you will. So sit back, enjoy Jonathan Edwards singing shanty, and we'll be back on the other side of 420.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
do. I mean, he even admits, this is the song that made me famous. Sunshine was a big hit, and Shanty was just more of a cult song. And of course, we are resurrecting that and enlightening a whole new generation about the words to Shanty, who Jonathan Edwards is, and he lives in New England. He's from New Hampshire, and hopefully one day he'll take the drive down, and we can put him in the corner and put a camera on him and do the whole thing again live, which would be great. But right now we're talking with Sam Cantor, and she is the owner of Dinner at Mary's, which is a meals to go service, but also a catering service. You do private dinners as well, and in the Boston area.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit in the break about how many meals a week do you guys actually do?
Yeah.
And how does that all work?
So we're expanding every week. We are not releasing our numbers to the public, but
okay, that's all right. You don't have to. I appreciate you sharing them with me, and I'm not going to report on them. So there you go.
But yeah,
you're growing.
We're growing.
There you go.
That's what we're talking about right now. Yeah, we're growing. We're doing more and more every week, and that's the goal for me for sure. And we're excited to see what numbers we can get. We're growing the quickest we can right now, which is nice.
Yep.
So we're kind of on pace of where we want to be, what our capabilities are, and really working on the back end to have bigger capabilities so that we can do
there you go.
more.
There you go. So whenever we hear the ding dong doorbell, we know that one of our scheduled guests is coming on and is going to join us.
Great.
And now I get to introduce Professor Linda Berry. Hi, Linda, how are you? Uh-oh.
I'm doing well. I had
There we
the
are.
program on.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You are a professor at the Cleveland School of Cannabis, our friends out there in Ohio, and I appreciate you joining us today. How are you? How are things out in Ohio today?
Well, actually, I'm in Virginia, so I teach for the school. I started in Ohio, working in person, but now I'm in Virginia, and I still teach classes, but they're online.
Gotcha.
So we're working on the national audience now.
Gotcha. Well, that's great, and we're happy that you're able to join us here. And I do have a person in studio with me today. Her name is Sam Cantor, and she's running a dinner, online dinner, meals to go kind of a business, and is involved in this as well. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about. But I guess the first thing I do want to ask you right off the bat is, when you are a chef, okay, the most important thing is you're not taking the flour off the stalk, chopping it up like you would parsley or basil, and then sprinkling it on the food. You actually have to decarboxylate it, right?
You have to decarboxylate it if you're looking to get the full spectrum of that plant. There are a lot of people that actually use THC A, which is THC without the decarboxylation, and they use that for different medicinal purposes. So there are people who they'll take the plant and they'll either sprinkle it for flavor. There's a chef, his name is Leather Stores. He actually just did a show on Netflix. And he'll use the THCA, which is the plant that's not decarboxylated, for the flavor, for some of the other medicinal benefits. But the decarboxylation process actually activates that entire cannabinoid. So you can do either way. There are people who juice the plant as well.
Right. And there are machines that will decarboxylate it for you. But I believe that you can also do it, I don't know, the way they've done it probably for thousands of years before people knew what the hell to call the damn thing. How does a rookie chef in the kitchen who wants to try the trade, if you will, would you go about doing decarboxylation like with a frying pan? Is that accurate?
So I don't necessarily recommend a frying pan for the decarboxylation. I recommend putting it into the oven on just a baking sheet and like either parchment paper or a steel pat mat to catch any of the shake or the keef that's going to fall off of your cannabis while it's in the oven, and putting it in for 240 degrees for 30 minutes. And that's going to be the easiest way to decarboxylate your THC. If you don't have a machine, if you don't have another way that you prefer to do it.
So again, I have to have a science degree sometimes to understand half this stuff, right? You take the flour. Now, do you put anything on the flour in the pan?
No, there are some people they will spray like alcohol because they believe that you get a better extraction that way, but you don't have to. For the most part, I just recommend breaking your cannabis down so that you're able to get more of that surface heat onto the cannabis, because when you're activating your cannabis, it's happening thermally. So you need to break the cannabis down a little bit, just put it on a single layer and then put it into the oven that way.
Okay, and you said it was 30 minutes at 240, correct?
Yep.
Wow. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's something I've avoided for my entire life. When you get right down to it, it's the same way I feel about actually taking the seeds and planting them. That's too much pressure. There's too much pressure on me to get this going and to do that. So I've always avoided it, and I kind of give it back to, I'm also a medical patient, so I say I'm going to go to the medical dispensary and try a brownie or a cookie or a gummy or the honey. I enjoy the honey as well.
It's really good.
What are some of the strangest things that people have cooked with cannabis, as far as you know?
Well, the fact that you can cook anything with cannabis, I think that could probably be a little bit strange. When peanut butter started to become infused with cannabis, initially I was like, I don't know that I want cannabis in my peanut butter, but it makes sense. I actually, I use cannabis for my rheumatoid arthritis. So for me, being able to put it into something like a peanut butter or put it into something like honey, that actually what I thought started off as being something I was like, I don't know about this. It's something that I actually prefer now. I started cooking with cannabis 6 years ago. So when I was experimenting, seeing where I was then versus where I am now as an actual cannabis professional, I don't know that I've seen something that's like crazy out there, but I would say that usually when most people get introduced, their first reaction is, oh, you infuse into butters, you infuse into oils. And I don't know if they think of it as weird, but just out of the norm to infuse something like a honey or a peanut butter or something along those lines.
There you go. And because there's always a delayed effect to the edible experience, I know a lot of people will do it once, end up perhaps not getting any effect in the first hour, and decide, you know what, I'll double the dose or whatever they put in it, and then they have a really bad experience, and then they never go back. But there is definitely a responsible way to cook with it and find out what is the magic amount of product that you put in, correct?
Yeah, the recommendation is to start low and increase slowly. So it takes a little bit of patience. When you see people that are like, I tried an edible, it knocked me out, I'm never trying edibles again. That's usually because they're coming in at a very high dosage, either the first time that they're trying it, or they may be experiencing a cannabis edible that's the right dosage and it's taking longer than expected to kick in. So they go ahead and they take another bite, or I'm an advocate for microdosing when you're first starting, which is starting with 5 to 10 milligrams and then working your way up from there. Yeah. But there are people that are like, I just need 100 milligrams. And I'm like, but are you sure you need 100 milligrams when you're first starting out? Because most of the time that means that you're dealing with someone that doesn't actually know what they're doing in the kitchen. If you're starting out that high and you're saying, yeah, 100 milligrams, or you're gonna have a really bad experience with the cannabis, which may be you being couch locked, it may be you not being able to function or having a panic attack, which that's when people like, they do things like call the police, like I think I'm dying. And it's not that they're dying, it's that they're having an undesirable effect because they didn't start at the milligram amount that they needed. And most people don't usually need to start at 100 milligrams. So when I have students like that, I'm like, no, who told you that? I know it sounds great, but in the professional space right now, 30 milligrams is actually starting to become considered like 20 to 30 milligrams is the sweet spot in the industry right now. It's not 100 milligrams.
Well, okay, so let's make this very clear right off the bat here. First of all, Sam is here, and when we mentioned the 100 milligrams, she was like, no.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
I start with 5. I always tell people to start with 5 milligrams. Yeah, I feel like that's the move.
And I'm not even sure 5 milligrams is considered a microdose anymore. I think 2.5 milligrams.
Well, you can't even find the 2.5s anymore, I feel
like. Well, you got to cut the 5 milligram in half, right?
Yeah, but like as a heavy cannabis user, I take 5 milligrams at a time, that's it.
Yeah, and I've found a comfort zone of about 10 milligrams. Mm-hmm. And since I always say I'm the oldest guy on this show anyway, I probably have put more milligrams in over my lifetime than everybody here. I don't want more than 10 milligrams. I had a 33 milligram experience my first time with an edible, and it was not pleasant, let's just say. Granted, I shouldn't have had the martini when I did, let's just say, because when you start mixing, you are taking that effect times about 8, right?
Yeah, you exasperate the effect for sure.
And that's one of the things that people don't really understand is like it's an either or experience, really, especially Sam's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mix, but I am experienced. I think you have to be really careful. So our events, we don't, we never have liquor. We've done some beer and wine. We really leave that up to them, but we typically recommend no alcohol if they're having a cannabis experience because it's challenging and it really accentuates both things. And if you're not experienced with it, it can be really challenging.
Right.
And dangerous. I mean, that's not what we're
right. That's the most, and again, we preach it, responsible moderation and use of this product because truly it's accepted almost universally that it has medicinal qualities. So you're asking the public to self-medicate with something that they may never have even understood before, or maybe they were at a party back in the day at college and they took a puff or two and whether they inhaled or not, whether they ran for president or not, something like that. Anyway, point being again, you really have to be careful with this substance when you ingest it. And the other thing that we learned is having a full stomach or even a little something in your body helps with the experience. What's your feeling about that?
It does. If you eat, that helps with the experience because the cannabis isn't just going in and being the first thing that's consumed. So like, I liken it to when you are experiencing someone that's like, yeah, I woke up in the morning and I just consumed cannabis. And you're gonna feel like that cannabis is gonna kick in a little quicker, which you may or may not feel like that's a good thing. But in terms of having a balanced experience, consuming food with your cannabis, much the same way as you will with alcohol. Your experience consuming food with your alcohol versus food without alcohol is going to be completely different. And so it's the same with cannabis as well.
It's the same, but it's the opposite almost, right? Because if you're drinking on an empty stomach, you're going to get drunker, whereas if you're consuming cannabis without, because it's a huge thing for me. If I need to have a meal for an edible to affect me, I have to have something in my stomach. If I'm on an empty stomach, I won't even feel it at all. It's totally
So it's good to have something like an appetizer or a tapas, a small plate, right?
Yeah.
Before you partake in an edible will enhance the experience, yes?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you this, that if you do and want to try to mix, do not count the drinks or the amount of beers, count the sips, because there will be an immediate effect every time you take a sip of an alcohol drink if you have any THC-based cannabis in there. Good advice, guys? Yeah, sipping?
Yeah, you should be careful. I mean, thinking about alcohol in general, it's most
poison.
People have it's poison. Yeah.
Sorry,
but
it's good tasting poison, but it's poison.
Most people have more experience with alcohol than cannabis, and if you think back to when you first started drinking, the measurement is easier, and you understand, okay, this many drinks of this type does this, and vice versa. And I think that research is really important for people to do when it comes to cannabis. So I know if I have 3 vodka drinks, I'm going to feel a certain way. If I've eaten this much food, cannabis, I've done that research, so now I know if I've had 5 milligrams in that kind of scenario, that's what it's going to do. And most people don't. And I think that it's important to know separately how they affect you, and then also how they affect you together if you ever are going to combine them. But it takes a little research. You got to figure it out, and people don't always put in that effort, and I think it can be really beneficial. People do.
We
Linda,
actually
go ahead.
We have a lot of students that come in and they don't even know that alcohol exasperates cannabis. So that's something that we have to go back and we have to teach the students. And then if I do events or if I'm doing a private dinner, it's definitely something that we don't even introduce alcohol because of that. So we'll do a mocktail and we'll use something like a CBD in the mocktail, but we do not actually use alcohol with our dinners because most people don't understand that principle.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting from a business perspective what's going on now in the world, because you're seeing beer companies investing in the cannabis space. They recognize that there's another adult intoxication product out there that's becoming more and more well-known and more accessible. And after they've established themselves as the giants in the intoxication business, if you will, they want to be part of it. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it all rolls out. I believe in California, you're already seeing infused beverages. Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Right, I was just gonna say, yeah, I saw PBR, but they're not. But it's not created by PBR. It's,
right.
It's like they're lending the name, which to me is confusing. Not sure I totally understand why they're doing that, but
it's called money and advertising and branding
yes,
and all that, right?
But like, how do you put your name on something you're not actually doing?
Right.
I guess that's just a business thing. I feel like you should be involved, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that the alcohol conglomerates don't take over because they have their thing.
Well, and yet, while you say that, Sam, I'm going to go on the other side and say they have experience in their thing.
Fair enough.
And you're talking about another adult intoxicating product.
Right.
And I believe that God put it on this earth to enhance our lives, not to dull our senses, make us make stupid mistakes like getting behind the wheel of a car when you've had too many drinks, or even one or two drinks, because it absolutely will affect your reflexes, as opposed to sometimes the cannabis effect and some of the sativas that are out there, the ones that help you focus, actually those who have driven under the influence of a sativa-based cannabis plant might actually feel like, I actually drive better.
Yeah.
What do you you've heard this story too, am I right, Linda?
Yeah, I have. It just depends on the strain. And I was gonna say, back to the beer companies getting into the cannabis industry, we teach a lot about terpenes at the college, and hopefully in the beer industry getting more involved in the cannabis space, hopefully there's some crossover in, I guess, pairing some of the natural terpenes that you find in some of the beers from the hops with some of the strains if they get into the THC side of things, because I feel like that would be a natural way to kind of merge those two industries, as opposed to being like, hey, this is the green rush, so now we're going to jump on board. Right. I think that there are ways that they can kind of get involved.
There is a beer company that uses terpenes, and I'm blanking on the name.
That's right. I know Google knows.
Google definitely knows. Excuse me, Sweetwater 420.
Thank you. See?
Okay,
and all I had to do.
I'm familiar with Sweetwater.
Yeah, we partnered with them and have had some of their beer at our events, and it's really terpene focused. And they originally, I think, tried to incorporate CBD and THC, and it didn't work super well with it just didn't work out. But
didn't work.
Yeah, terpenes are I think a great additive and a great way for those two to pair versus alcohol and cannabis, more of like terpene that doesn't have a
I'm going to ask the professor a little quiz. Can you define what a terpene is? Now, we talk a lot about terpenes on this show, and we've had our scientists on and all this, but I always like to hear how people who do understand the effects of the terpenes in the plant, how you define what the terpenes do.
So my terpene breakdown, because I work with populations, I work with the college, but I also do education seminars for just the industry and just people that are in the community. So my terpene breakdown is a little bit different. So what I like to say is that the terpene is one of the essential oils of a plant. And when you're thinking about terpenes in cannabis, you have your major cannabinoids that are like the steering wheel to your car, or the wheels of your car. And the terpene is like the steering wheel that's gonna kind of tell you, well, your sativa is gonna give you a upper effect. Like it's gonna make you maybe more happy or more giggly, but that terpene is going to go ahead and is going to say, okay, cool, and now this is also going to help you to be more focused. Or so that's pretty much how I explain it. I explain it in terms of a car because people get it. They're like, oh, okay, cool, so my THC, my CBD, that's going to be my wheels, and then the terpene is going to kind of turn that car into whatever direction.
That was absolutely perfect, and exactly how most people describe it, the steering mechanism in the plant. And great analogy. Great analogy. I knew you. I didn't think I was putting you on the spot here at all. Okay, I appreciate that. What's some of the? If you were looking at the future, where do you think we're going to see the infusion of the THC-based cannabis in foods, beverages? Where do you think we're moving towards?
Well, beverages are already huge.
Right.
I think that you're going to continue to see that beverage industry just take off with the cannabis involved, because the sublingual effect happens so much. I don't want to say so much quicker, but it happens at a faster rate than when you're consuming the cannabis by eating it. I think that if we're talking about cannabis and edibles, I think that you're going to continue to see cannabis be infused into meals, which is why I love that you have a whole meal company represented, because people don't usually think about cannabis edibles that way initially. They think about the brownies, they think about the cookies. So I think that that's going to continue to be the wave of the future. Is going to grow. But then outside of just eating cannabis, I think that when you're thinking about like suppositories, I think that way, I feel like the cannabis industry is going to continue to go in that way as well, because it just makes natural sense. And that part of the industry isn't as explored as I feel like it should be, because that also goes into the bloodstream the same way that the beverage industry has just taken off, because it affects your body a little faster than if you're consuming the food.
There you go. You know, it's funny, she mentioned suppositories, and it's always kind of a giggly thing, right? I'm in the classroom at Stockton University yesterday online. Rob Mahee is going to join us in a few minutes, in about 10 minutes. And he was going over the quiz that he had. And the question about suppositories on this quiz, okay, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't know if anybody's going to know the answer to this, but the question was, how far do you need to insert into your anus the suppository for it to be effective? Now,
I have no idea.
Right? No idea, right? Because right, okay. Just for the record, the answer was 1.5 inches, and I'm like, and who's measuring it? That's what I want to know, because it makes absolutely no right. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. You brought up some, you used the word, and that's where my brain immediately went to that quiz item. And we'll be talking with the professor about that in about 10 minutes too, because I want to know who's measuring this and where did you find the research on that one, right? Anyway,
research and everything, right?
That's right. We're talking with Linda Berry, the professor at Cleveland School of Cannabis. What's the name of your course that you teach?
I teach the Cooking with Cannabis course, so it's pretty straightforward. Yep.
So okay, so it's the cooking with. But do you see other courses, like would it be dessert cooking with cannabis? Would it be entree, vegan cooking with cannabis? Will we see other spin-offs of this course eventually, do you think?
I believe so. Right now we are teaching at a basic level. We have students that come in that don't even know how to cook. So right now we're at a 100 level for sure. But I do definitely see us going into a 200 level where we're able to expound more upon. Now you take these menus, that's part of the project that the students have to do. You take these menus, and now here's a way to replicate the menus. And if you are a medical user in Ohio, because especially for me, because I'm online, here are different ways that you can take the extractions that you know how to do and infuse them at home or infuse them at school, or however we are deciding to do that. But I definitely see us in the future getting to a 200 level, a 300 level, because we also have professional chefs that come in. And honestly, professional chefs that come in, it's interesting because they know food, but they don't know cannabis with food. So we're teaching them how to do this safely. And they're the ones that are going to be able to go out and really put on their own events and partner with different companies. Much like, it's Alex, right?
It's Jimmy and Sam.
Sam, much like Sam's company, I was excited. I was watching the interview before now, but I think that is something that we want to continue to do in the future, is make sure that we are not just giving a 100 level, but also when we have professionals that come in just to learn about cannabis, giving them more of an exploration. Because I know for me, I've been in the cannabis space on a professional level for the past 3 years doing events, both large events and private events. So definitely something that we're looking forward to.
And speaking of some of those events that you've done, when we chatted yesterday for the first time, you actually have cooked for some pretty well-known celebrities, let's just say.
Yeah, I have. So I work with Chef Nikki Stewart, and with her company, we do the High End Affair, and we travel all over the United States. We're sponsored by Weed Maps. We have some pretty cool partnerships, but it's afforded us the opportunity to make food for people like Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, which Chris Rock was just on the Ellen show, and he's like, yeah, so, you know, Dave Chappelle has his weed chef. And I was like, thanks, Chris. It's a great shout out. But yeah, I mean, the celebrities are learning a lot in this space as well, because for the most part, a lot of the celebrities that we work with were recreational users. And so we're able to now introduce them to the education side of things as well.
That's great. That's great. I love hearing that. And again, we're working towards, you know, everybody calls this the new normal because of COVID and everything, but don't forget the cannabis industry was talking about the new normal before COVID hit. I just want to say, not that we, you know, I'm not keeping score or anything at home, but that is accurate.
That is accurate.
And anyway, Chef Linda Berry, Professor Linda Berry, thank you so much for coming on today, talking with us about this. I really have enjoyed the educators that we are getting on our show from the Cleveland School of Cannabis. I always learn, I always say, everyone has something to teach someone else, whether it's the life journey that they've been on or their experience in their expertise in their field. Whatever it is, they have something to teach and share. And I really have enjoyed chatting with you. And I now know temperature 240, 30 minutes with a in the oven. That's what I learned today. So appreciate your time.
Parchment paper under it to catch the shake or if anything falls off. So thank you for having me. Thank you for having the Cleveland School of Cannabis back on your show. We really enjoyed it. Sam, I'm going to be checking out your company. I'm so excited about that.
Please do. Yeah.
It's going to be tough to deliver to Virginia, but at least now you've got a medical program in Virginia that's happening. So, and by the way, she is the business owner. She's willing to relocate and franchise and do all that stuff, right?
We'll figure something out for sure.
I love that.
Sam, I'll be reaching out.
All right.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much, Linda. So before we take a break, I do want to play one clip that we prepared, and I also was going to allow me to hopefully not butcher David's name. Youssef Sadeh, right? He's with Eat Sacrilegiously, is that what it is?
Eat Sacrilegious.
Eat Sacrilegious.
I'm not sure if he still is, to be honest.
That's where he earned his reputation and cut his teeth, if you will.
Cloud Creamery is primarily what he does, I believe. Yeah.
Right, and I know the Cloud Creamery Group because absolutely has been on a show that I did with Kurt Dalton earlier. I think it was earlier, I don't know if it was this year or last year. I mean, has this not been the longest year in creation in all of our lives? Okay?
I know, how do we keep track?
But anyway, we were talking about infusing food with THC-based cannabis. And here's a clip from that Weed Talk show we did a few months ago.
Is it
preserve
all
it.
CBD or just...
No. Their oils are still there and all that stuff. Their T-shirts are still there. Everything. It's just infused in food.
Oh,
and right,
okay.
Right, David. And that's a no-no. Right now, that's a no-no. It's a stupid no-no. Okay, it really is.
It's really just it's managed poorly. It really comes down to poor management, in my opinion, from the top. And I don't want to put all the blame on the CCC because there's lots of things that they are being held to, but I moved here from Illinois, and the Chicago market already is just its trajectory is going to put us to shame, and frankly it's embarrassing. There's a lot of people that need a lot of food, that need a lot of cannabis through food to help them digest. People like myself that are going through Crohn's disease, and we can get to that, but it's really beneficial to balance nausea, help people get their day started right, and if you can get good rest and have a good diet, you're really in the best place to battle anything that's coming your way. So it's amazing that flour and all these things were legal first. Frankly, it's baffling, but it's a business, and I think we all just have to remember that our generation is here to clean up a lot of things that have gone.
That my generation has screwed up. It's okay.
And before you.
Yeah.
It's not all on you.
I appreciate that.
It started, in the Industrial Food Revolution, but I really think that we are here to communicate the benefits and really, point out with our technology that there's so many federal research projects that showed positive results that were not funded by the federal government. And we're happy to do it.
Media. On Wednesdays, we call it Professor Weed Wednesdays. I'm Jimmy Young, the host and founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of this show. In studio with us has been Sam Cantor. Dinneratmarys.com is her website. And joining us now on our Zoom interview line is Professor Rob Mejia from Stockton University. Hello, Professor Mejia. How are you? Good, and thank you so much for joining us. Do we have a visual or not? No visual today, Rob?
That's weird. I turned on my camera. I'm not sure why you can't see me.
Well, we're seeing Mawa at night right now with your name on it, which is, obviously, I love making you laugh. You have such a great belly laugh. I love that. So let me tell you a little bit about Rob as he tries to figure out how to turn on his camera, or if he doesn't, it's not a big deal. We got your name up there. He's an adjunct professor from Stockton University, and that's in southern New Jersey. And he teaches the preparation for cannabis internship and introduction to medical cannabis courses that is part of the minor in cannabis at Stockton University. And he also is involved with Our Community Harvest. He's written a few books on this, and I actually had him on In the Weeds with me a couple of months ago, and for some reason, he invited me into his classroom this week to talk with his students about the importance of an internship, because the internship that I did back as a junior at Tufts University changed my life and my career path, and I hope, Rob, it was well received. Was it?
Absolutely. Actually, the students remarked that they loved your energy, your sense of humor, and they also liked that your story was kind of similar to theirs. They are looking for their internship. They're looking for their foot in the door. And they liked that you went out there and you just did it. You sent in material, you followed up, and you delivered. And I think that's a good message for them, that they have to get out there and grab it.
I appreciate that, Rob. You know what I found amazing is when I finally guilted your kids into turning their video cameras on, the different ages of the different students in there. That was kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I have to say, for that class, I have students who are 20. Most want to be 21 because it is an internship class, and of course that opens up more opportunity for them. So the youngest student I have is 20, and the oldest, I won't give you the age, but older than you and me, Jimmy.
Good job, Rob. That was very well done. That was very well. So that means they're over 63, let's just say, because I know how old I am. Okay.
Fair enough.
Rob, what's one of the things that you've learned yourself recently about the cannabis plant? And I'm gonna tell you, I already told the story about your quiz and the question about suppositories. I had to do it. Who knew how far you had to put the damn suppository in your ass? All right, I mean, and now I know because I followed the quiz.
Well,
but is there something out there that you've learned recently about the cannabis plant that you were kind of intrigued about?
Well, to follow up on the suppository question, it actually is important, because if you don't, the medicine is not delivered, and it is one of the most efficient methods of delivery if you do it right. So, yeah, as uncomfortable as that sounds, even right now I'm screwing in my chair a little bit. That's important. That's important to do it. I think one of the interesting things that I learned recently about the cannabis plant is that if you are a grower, that the cannabis plant actually follows a lot of the same. It likes a lot of the same things that tomato plants do. So it likes a lot of the same environment, humidity, sunshine, nutrients. So if you can grow a decent tomato plant, if you're able to grow at home and you follow that regimen, you'll actually be able to grow a cannabis plant.
Well, that's kind of cool. I like analogies and comparisons. I did tell you about Sam and her business model, the Dinner at Mary's business model. New Jersey has a ballot question that is now polling 3 in favor to 1 against the adult use cannabis industry opening up for sale in New Jersey. Again, another opportunity for entrepreneurs to perhaps go. Are there any catering services in New Jersey offering these kind of infused dinners?
There are a few. There's more pop-up right now. So New Jersey actually has some interesting regulations where they do allow CBD infused food and beverage. So before COVID, regardless of what town you're in New Jersey, you could walk down the street and find a coffee place And one of the most popular things was to have your coffee and then to get 10 milligrams of CBD added to it for an extra $2 or $3. And so many places offered that that product. But then going further, I do know a number of chefs who would go into people's homes. I also did a couple of these events as well, but they were all CBD infused. We're not there yet where Massachusetts is. I would love to see some THC infused dinners in New Jersey at some point, but we're not there yet. So there's kind of a small service of people who do provide CBD infused food and beverage.
So that's confused. Like we were for a little bit doing some CBD stuff, and then everyone got shut down because I thought that was federally illegal that you couldn't put CBD into food the same way you can't put THC into food. So I'm surprised.
You're bringing up that tremendous cannabis issue that goes across almost everything, that it's hard to say something is totally legal, totally illegal. So on a federal level, you could look at CBD as being entirely illegal, but then you could also look at the Farm Act and say, oh no, it's entirely legal. Right. But in New Jersey, we actually have legislation that does say, and there's a couple lines that I've had to pull out that does say that you can infuse food and or beverage with CBD. But then it doesn't give you any guidelines about how much or anything else about that. It just says that you can do it. And so people are just doing it until we get stopped.
Yeah.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
That's right. And yet this is another reason why this election is so important, because it really is historic, and there is such a division between the two parties on so many fronts. But the cannabis front is pretty much front and center, which is absolutely amazing to me that, we're talking about that now. And I've already voted. So my vote is one of the 28 million that's already hopefully been counted somewhere, or at least, I don't even know. Do you know if they are actually counting the mail-in votes as they come in, or are they just counting those votes total voting? Anybody?
Every state does it differently. I know that New Jersey is going to start counting this Saturday, but gotcha. There are some states like Wisconsin, I believe, that they won't even start until all the ballots, or until the polling is closed.
Until the polling's closed, right. And again, I will tell you this, after years of being a voter and always saying, as I walk into the polling place, giving them my name, telling them my address, they tell me which ward or whatever precinct I'm in, and then I go and I fill it out. But never do they ask you for your ID when you go in to make your vote. And I've always said that is the strangest thing I've ever. To buy Robitussin in CVS, I have to show my ID. But I can vote, and nobody's going to question my identity at all. And when I voted by mail this year, and I took a picture of myself, or video actually, of me putting it into the box, I had a record of it. And I felt a far better, secure experience. And that was just personally. I don't know how you feel about that.
I also voted by mail, as did the rest of my family. And the one concern I have, though, is my signature, because my signature has absolutely changed over the past probably 20 years. 20 years ago, I probably would have gotten a nice penmanship award, and I used my middle initial. But over time, I don't know if it's because I just was writing too much or got lazy or whatever, but now it looks like a doctor's a doctor's scribble, and it does not look like it did probably when I registered to vote.
Interesting. But are they matching that signature from when you registered to vote, or are they matching it to what the state has on record for the driver's license? That I don't know.
At least in New Jersey, they match it to when I registered to vote. And so I did look at that signature, and I did sign it that same way, or as closely as I could.
Right. And of course, my fingers are all arthritic now, so it's completely, a moot point anyway. But anyway, what's going on with that? You also have written a book. Am I right, Rob? Can you enlighten us a little bit about that book and what's in that book? And you get a shameless plug time now.
There you go. Well, this is the Essential Cannabis Book, a field guide for the curious. And I did write that. It's actually on its 2-year anniversary. So it came out the day that Canada legalized cannabis, October 18th of 2018. So it's been out for 2 years now. And it does cover actually a lot of ground for 184 pages. So it does cover history, both domestic and internationally. And that might be the part that I'm particularly fond of, because I have to say it was intriguing to go through the history and then try to give a coherent story, and then also compare it to what's happening in the world, because every country handles it so differently that I just find it fascinating. So it starts with history. We go over botany, we go over science, methods of consumption, medical possibilities. We go over social issues. I have resources like annotated websites. And then, of course, because I like to cook with cannabis, and that's kind of a sideline business, I have actually 3 chapters in the book on cooking with cannabis. Infusion, how to run a dinner party, both a beginning dinner party if somebody's brand new, or how to run one for people who are experienced. And then I squeezed in 40 recipes. On top of that, I interviewed 20 people who are involved in the cannabis industry, and their stories are sprinkled throughout the book. So I have dispensary owners, I have medical patients, I have cannabis chefs, I have nuns who grow CBD flower in California, a sheriff in Aspen who's pro-cannabis, just very intriguing stories. And I thought that was a way to pull the readers in, because I thought, well, if you see your neighbors, colleagues, people like you, it kind of normalizes cannabis. So I like that part too.
And of course, you can get that on Amazon. Am I right?
You are right. You can get on Amazon, a few dispensaries, some college bookstores, a lot of online places. So there is very good distribution. Yes.
All right. That's fantastic. Well, Rob, I appreciate you spending a little time with us today. Are there any tips that you might want to share with a entrepreneur who has a company that's based on meal kits? In fact, Sam, why don't you tell Rob a little bit about what you've done with Dinner at Mary's, and then see if he might be able to give you a tip or two or something like that.
We'd love tips. We were doing primarily private catered events and ticketed events originally. We pivoted to do the meal kit delivery service. So we've shifted our model pretty dramatically and are now doing 3-course high-end restaurant quality food that for 2 people in a kit for local delivery with an optional cannabis gift that can be that can be added to the recipe. So people are infusing themselves.
And do you provide any educational information for them in the meal kits?
We do.
Is there a brochure or
something? There's a recipe included, and we provide information on how long the cannabis typically takes to feel the effects of, how much we would recommend using. It's a 20 milligram gift for 2 guests, so we typically recommend 10 milligrams per person, but then also give recommendations for starting with 5 milligrams, for example, if you're not as experienced.
Experienced.
Yeah. So we include that that recommendation and that information as an educational aspect in each kit.
And she's marketing a chicken pot pie this week.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! I hope you took a piece of pastry and made it into the
ubiquitous
cannabis leaf.
So every pod pie, and we do a photo shoot every month for the meal kits that we make them in. And my chef had, a cannabis leaf on the top of the pot pie, and I was like, "You do realize, we're taking pictures of this, so you're gonna have to do this for the actual meal kits." And he's like, "Signed up," because it looks great. It'll be nice and Instagrammable this week.
I did see that occasionally you offer Mexican food. I believe I saw some tacos in there.
We do, yeah. The taco kit is what we're delivering tomorrow. So yeah, we're doing a taco kit, and Nick, the chef, is Dominican. He has a lot of experience with that type of food and that cuisine, and we always try to mix it up. But yeah, we definitely.
One thing that I personally did when I made homemade tortillas, that is just kind of visually stunning, is if you take a raw tortilla, and then you take a raw cannabis leaf, and you put it on there. You cook one side of the tortilla, you flip it over, and you actually cook the tortilla and the cannabis leaf together. And then when you take it out, and that's only like 45 seconds. When it comes out, it's actually kind of imprinted and slightly toasted on the top of the tortilla, and it looks beautiful. And then you can so I actually use that as kind of a placemat. So when people came in, they had their tortilla with their kind of imprinted cannabis leaf on there, and then they could add their own ingredients, and I called that rolling your own.
Love that. I'll have to.
I cannot.
Have to give my chef a heads up about that.
Just give Rob Mejia credit. That's all, because
you definitely get credit for that idea.
That's what we like to do, and I love that tip, Rob. You really have embraced the culture in New Jersey. I really hope that this initiative passes, and that another state will come on board on the East Coast. I also reported this week. We heard reports that Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York has a budget item. Once again, he's really trying to get legalization of adult use in his state. And they were, I don't know if they weren't able to get it done in the last year, but it does seem like now that Vermont has gone, Massachusetts has gone, if New Jersey goes, he's going to want to make sure some of the money from his state stays in his state, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing that you're going to see is I believe that after November 3rd, when New Jersey does legalize adult use, which I think they will, that there is going to be a race between New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. One advantage that New York will have, if they put it in their budget item, that means they can get this done legislatively. And if you can pass this by the legislature, your program can be implemented faster, you can be more nimble, you can make more changes. And so strangely, New Jersey may legalize by adult use, but then we have to put our legislation in place. And we do have a lot of it written already. But then New York can actually do it by their legislature and they can move faster. And that's how I think Pennsylvania is going to do it too. So unfortunately, I think that New Jersey might lose a little bit of our head start because we were not able to do it legislatively before. I think we will be ahead a little bit. We might have a good little 6-month, 9-month lead, but I do believe that New York and Pennsylvania will catch up pretty quickly.
And isn't it amazing that we're in this pandemic and how cannabis has an opportunity to actually help rebuild the economy, actually get and build more jobs and employment. I mean, it's almost like it was a perfect storm of different things happening, and now the cannabis plant could end up being embraced rather than scorned for 80 years in this country. I just cannot believe I lived to see this day, Rob.
I'm with you. Actually, during COVID, when cannabis was deemed essential, when those words came out, I thought, wow, that is something I never thought I would ever see. And other businesses are closing down, and cannabis gets the chance to pivot and serve people through delivery and curbside pickup and all the things we had to do to kind of keep everything going. But it was embraced as medicine. And people said, yeah, people need to continue to get their medicine. So it is essential. And I think that whole thing sort of helped normalize and kind of move things along. But yes, I'm stunned every day.
And you're teaching it, for crying out loud. And there's a minor at Stockton University too. I just think it's great. Now I'm finding out, I interviewed Max Simon from Green Flower this week, and we released that on our YouTube channel. And they're all about education. And now I believe there are 7 universities that have embraced their online curriculum as something you can take for credit. Rob, you heard my story about my internship. I couldn't believe I could get college credit for watching sports on TV, because that's how it all began in 1977. And now you're probably hearing a lot of the same thing with kids saying, I can't believe I'm getting college credit for taking cannabis courses, right?
Exactly. I mean, the students are very motivated, and they do like to show up to class. They have a lot of questions. I have so many people who are minoring in cannabis studies and who are even changing some of their minors. So I'm only seeing good things and growth. And I know Stockton's actually looking at a couple more online classes that I proposed to them as well. One on social equity in cannabis and one on integrated media in cannabis. So I'm hoping they'll take me up on that and I'll get to develop those courses for them. But the demand, the interest, the passion, it's all there.
It is. It's truly a perfect storm for this right now. Appreciate that. Hey, Rob Mejia, as always, I could talk to you for hours and hours because there's so many interesting aspects of what you've already discovered and encountered and documented and now built into your curriculum. I also understand that you might actually have a student that might be interested in interning with us in some capacity.
I definitely have a student who is interested in interning with you. We are shaping up their resume to make sure that they look good, that they're well qualified. But yes, they'll be ready to go.
Fantastic. Well, Rob Mejia from Stockton University in New Jersey. Again, thank you so much for joining us on our Professor Weed Wednesdays. And we will continue our conversation a little bit at some point down the road. But thank you again. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Wonderful to be here.
All right, that's Rob Mejia. Fun guy. Wouldn't you like to take a course with him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wish that was an option when I was in school.
No kidding. Well, we studied weed, but it had nothing to do with the classroom, as we are, right?
I did do a lot of cannabis research.
That's right. Field research, we used to call that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, where'd you go to college?
Northeastern.
Northeastern University, right here in Boston.
Yep.
Okay. Great school. Love their co-op program, by the way.
Great. Yeah.
Love their sport and society program. In fact, I saw Dan Leibowitz recently quoted, and he's the head of that sport and society program there. And did you have, so I went to Tufts University in the 70s, way before anybody in this room was born, okay? and moved into Tufts when the drinking age was 18. Okay?
Yep.
On my birthday, I might add. My 18th birthday was the first day of move-in for freshmen at Tufts University. By the way, when it went to 21, I turned 21. So God has always been kind of blessing me and giving me opportunities to party, I guess.
My birthday's on the day the Prohibition ended. So I'm similar in that.
Okay, so there you go. There's some kind of sign there, right?
Yeah.
So in college, we had a water pipe. And of course, it was made up of chemistry beakers, and we named the water pipe Horace.
Okay.
Not quite sure where and how we came up with that. I'm sure it had something to do with the lab work and the research we were doing. Did you have anything like that in your college? Did you have a bong, perhaps, that you named? Or
there are a lot of named bongs, yeah.
Anyone in particular that comes to mind?
We're still part of a very food. Are you worried about the FDA at a federal level, even if you got it?
So I keep them around. But no, I think my first pipe was actually named Mary. Interestingly enough,
that makes sense.
That she is no longer. I don't even know what happened to her. But
right.
That's been kind of a.
And I'm guessing dinner at Mary's had something to do with the Mary Jane thing.
Yes, so it's the innuendo of Mary Jane. Mary's also my mother's name.
Ah.
And
I had an Aunt Mary, so there you go.
Yeah, so my mom's a great cook, and I grew up not even realizing how privileged I was to eat the kind of food I was eating, and really got me into the food industry. So she'd worked in restaurants as well, but I think that the main reason that I got into food was because of my mom's cooking and paying homage to that, also with an innuendo. But yeah, she's Mary of Dinner Mary. It's not her company, which people get confused about, is mine, but it was inspired by my mother as well.
Okay, there you go. And look, by the way, the role of the mother in the cannabis industry is extremely well documented. If you watch Weed the People, which is a great documentary put out a few years back in California, don't die on us, Dan. We need you here, okay? And there's so many opportunities to learn through media, different ways to consume. That's certainly out there, but we focus a lot on the news, information, the medicine, how to use it, what effects it might have on you, so that you'll learn something along the way on your journey as you get enlightened, if you want to enhance your life with this plant, because God put it on this earth for a medicinal reason. And yeah, there's some recreational enjoyment too. I think we can both agree with that. There's a tremendous socialization aspect of this plant, and we are totally seeing that already. But I do want to go back to one more clip that we have from our show with David Youssefzadeh.
Yeah.
David Y. Okay, and there was from that show that we did on We Talk with Kurt Dalton, and Dan McCarthy was there, and we talked a little bit about how early it is still in the industry's growth. I mean, we're talking about a nascent industry. There's 11 states that have it legalized. Then you add in Washington, D.C. Now you've got, I believe, 5 states on the ballot to legalize adult use recreational of cannabis. But realistically, even if they voted in, like they did in Massachusetts in 2016, it still took 2 years before Massachusetts actually opened up their first dispensary. Other states have been able to open up much quicker, sooner, and some perhaps you could make a case opened up too soon. But in the meantime, everybody's doing it now. We're getting it more and more accepted. Let's listen to our chat a little bit about how early it really is in this industry. We're still part of a very early stage, huge industry, right, guys? And you have to, patience is built into you if you're in this industry. Don't you think?
It's a marathon, not a race.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, you've been in the queue for 8 months with not a lot of communication on, hey, you're 2 more weeks, you're ready to, you're just like, could be tomorrow, might be in 3 months.
Zero communication.
That's tough to do.
And we don't have any retail space. We're a manufacturer, so no one is coming into our storefront. So our security measures, our everything is I mean, in general, I think much more straightforward than what a dispensary would have to go through. But in addition to that, I've opened 6 restaurants. My business partner has opened 2. So between us, our food safety, our track record, this is what we do. We're just merging cannabis in as another ingredient. So we were hoping that would leverage some credibility in our, being tasked with providing something safe and nutritious, but it really doesn't seem to matter.
Chat, the live in-studio production of Pro Cannabis Media that we do Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 4 p.m. Eastern to 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm joined in studio by Sam Cantor from Dinner at Mary's. Now, I Googled Dinner at Mary's, and a few other companies came up.
Interesting.
But you have the hyphens going, am I right?
Yes.
So
Dinner -- Mary's.
So two hyphens. Is a
Two
hyphen?
hyphens, yeah.
Two hyphens. It's Dinner at Mary's with hyphens after dinner and after at.
Yeah. I
Correct?
mean, hopefully we're coming, if we're Googling it, if we're Googling Dinner at Mary's, hopefully we're at least coming up in that first page.
Oh, no, you're on the first page. But I definitely clicked on a few others out there.
I think there are some Marys that cook dinner at home that,
Right.
Yeah, do some blogs about it.
Right,
so,
but
yeah.
it's not the Mary Jane that we
Oh, of
know
course
and
not.
love,
No,
and
no,
right?
definitely
Okay.
not what we're
All right.
what we're doing.
And okay, so that's cool. And we were talking about infused beverages, and we got a chat from someone from Arkansas. I don't know if he was from Bentonville, Arkansas, perhaps a Walmart employee of some kind. But anyway, they asked about where you could get some of these infused beverages. Now, we both agreed that California is definitely the market that is open now for the infused beverages.
Yeah.
I do believe, you said, Massachusetts, they're coming to Massachusetts, another legal state. So I'm going to then take a bit of a jump here and think that all legal states will have an opportunity to go to a dispensary to get infused beverages.
Right.
Now, that dispensary may be a medicinal dispensary or an adult use recreational dispensary, but every state is different. And again, another reason why I get fascinated by this industry, because now you can bring someone on from New Jersey to hear about what they're doing. And then, of course, everything's going to either get passed through the ballot box or through the legislature now. The legislature can make changes to that ballot box referendum question. And so, again, it just goes back to every state's going to be different. So we're always going to be needing to have a central location or a central talk show or something that has this opportunity to find out these things, right? Because every state's going to be different. And your model may not work in Wisconsin or in Michigan, but it may work in New Jersey because it's working here in Massachusetts.
Yes.
How difficult was it to work through the legalities of this, and how many hours did you have to have?
I mean, it's really difficult. It's still difficult. And we're working with a gifting model. But there are other things that we want to do that we can't do with a gifting model. So, we're talking about licensing. We're talking about that process.
Yep.
But it's very challenging, and it's not just challenging because of the legislation that's in place, but it's challenging because of the legislation that's coming, and it's also challenging because there's really no clarification. And to be realistic and transparent, a lot of the people that are trying to stop a lot of these things from happening don't understand them at all and don't really know the rules either.
Right.
So I mean, it's hard to
it's confusing
to
for
police
law
something
enforcement,
when they don't know what's legal and what's not.
Right.
And
then you have DAs that don't even want to prosecute cannabis crimes right now.
why would you?
Right.
I mean, let's be realistic. Like, why would you? I mean, the fact that they were ever policed is kind of beyond to me. I don't understand it, but certainly not now. I mean, people are being let out of jail because of cannabis crimes. We certainly don't want to put people into jail.
Did you know, and you're an enlightened woman, I appreciate that, of course, how many arrests for cannabis possession in the United States last year? And here's a hint. First of all, they went down from 2018 to 2019, but there were still more arrests for cannabis possession crimes than for violent crimes in our country.
It's
insane.
It's asinine. It's asinine is what that is. It's insane, and it's a real big waste of a lot of people's time, in my opinion.
And tax money, and our jails are filled with people that were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they found whether they were targeted by law enforcement just because of the way they were, looked, hung out, clothing, whatever it was.
I can't get it to work. God.
It was so I believe it was 536,000 arrests.
Oh my God!
For cannabis possession.
Yeah, I think that's another reason to defund.
Right. Well, no, I'm not going to go there.
Right. I
Okay.
will go there.
Right.
But yeah, you certainly don't need to. But I think that that sounds like there's too much time in their hands, because that's not something we should be prosecuting.
Right, but there again, I don't, and it's easy. By the way, easy to point fingers at that. And I mean, by the way, the law enforcement is such a tough job. I'm sorry.
Very difficult.
You know,
very challenging job. Absolutely. Some people do a great job, and some people don't. So yeah, it's really challenging, and they're not making the rules that they're enforcing. So you can't put it all on them. But that sounds like a number that's ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, that shouldn't be happening, and hopefully we're moving in a direction that it's not.
Right. Well, hopefully we are, and Lord knows Steve D'Angelo and the Last President Project is really trying to get all the people who have been incarcerated for cannabis crimes out of jail, and we support him 100%. Oh, sure. I was about to go to our next guest, but she decided, oh, there, she's back. Okay. So we're going to bring someone in now who is a rookie cannabis chef. Okay. We all in this on Pro Cannabis Media happen to know this person. She's been on Jimmy Kimmel a couple of times. You may have seen her. Okay.
Cool.
And I know she loves to talk about that. But it's Karen Solomon. She is our VP of Business Development and Strategic Marketing out of Santa Barbara, California. Hi, Karen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Great. I can hear you and I can see you. Hi, Sam.
How amazing is technology, huh?
I was trying to figure out how I was going to, be able to project myself through all the way from California.
Well, we're happy you're here, and there's a couple of reasons why you're here. First of all, because you live in California, and you're part of the most mature, what I consider to be the most mature cannabis market. I believe 80% of the illegal cannabis traffic comes out of Humboldt County, which is in the north of Santa Barbara. I know that. But one of the questions we got from our chat room was about infused beverages. Can you buy infused THC beverages at the dispensaries in California?
I'm drinking one right now.
Of course you are.
I know you can, because I've bought them in California.
There you go.
Yes.
So I that's fantastic. And
so
I
found this particular tea. It's a tea that is infused, and I would love to figure out how I can make my own. It's a little bit complicated, I think, but one day I'll figure it out. But here, I can show you the actual product. So this is the product.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess it's called Kiko or whatever, but this particular one is low THC, high CBD. So that's why I'm drinking it now, because right now for us it's 2:30 in the afternoon. So it helps a lot. I recently had knee surgery, and I find that this has been a godsend to the fact that I cannot take anti-inflammatories. So I can't take Advil, I can't take Aleve. Therefore, the tea really seems to work for me. But yes, I am an amateur. Sam, I'm pretty impressed with what you're doing. In fact, I'm trying to figure out why nobody's done it here, considering that we are such a mature market.
Wow.
I've never, ever heard of anybody catering meals with infused cannabis. I haven't heard it.
Well, it's funny because when Linda Berry was on, the professor from Cleveland School of Cannabis,
Right.
she talked about cooking for celebrities and how Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle all have these private parties that she has actually been at and catered. So, I mean, that is really bizarre. There's probably an underground group in California. I'm going to go on a limb thinking, Karen, that your invitations just get lost in the mail or something.
I gotta think that after this show, I'm gonna know more of where they are. I mean,
hopefully, yeah. I mean, well, what we were talking about earlier, like the infusion aspect in those catering events are, they can't happen in a public way anywhere because of it not being approved food additive and things like that. It gets complicated.
Right. Well, it has to do with the FDA and all that neat stuff. Right.
Right.
Yeah. DEA, FDA, USADA, and all the DAs in Washington, D.C., who can't quite figure out what to do with this product that can save the world. They will not embrace it until they are enlightened and educated enough by shows like this. Oh, and now, Karen, let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's new in the studio?
I love the new logo.
Indeed.
I like it. You were talking about it this morning. I'm glad to see it.
I think we all have agreed now in our own little personal focus group that we like the purple background. This was designed by our webmaster. We'll give Jacob credit and a shout out here. And we discovered it not on purpose because that's just what we do here, and decided to make it part of the show, and it's been well received. So, and Sam, you like the colors?
I like the colors.
And the leaf. Now the leaf is overlapping the M. Is that confusing to you at all, looking at it from a brand perspective?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's important for certain cannabis brands to really put the cannabis leaf out there. Like we specifically didn't. We're more subtle.
Right. Well, you have Mary's.
Right, we have Mary. Right, so we went the innuendo route. I think in this scenario, you have to be a little bit more straightforward about it.
Absolutely.
That's a good way to do it.
And how many cannabis logos have the color green in it?
Many.
Like
Many.
99%, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Karen, you got a cookbook of cannabis, I believe, as a gift recently. Can you enlighten us a little bit about your experience with that book, and have you tried any of these recipes?
Yeah, my kids are so cute. They're
adults, first of all. Let's make sure we understand that. Right.
They're adults, and they love the fact they make a funny. There's a song called "Mama's Cooking Weed in the Crock Pot" or something like that. There's a really funny rap song. I'll have to get it for you.
Please do, because that's actually one of the engaging things we've been talking about. Since I keep playing shanty at 420 on all our shows, the younger people on our staff have encouraged me to solicit our audience for suggestions of other songs that have positive cannabis messaging to it.
Right.
Do you like that idea?
I'll get you that. I will definitely get you the song. It's a very funny rap song, and the kids always make fun of me because, of course, the whole house when I was first practicing before I got my cookbook, which I just got for my birthday in September, I would do it in the crock pot, and it would just, it just smells. The whole house smells. You can't get away from the smell. It's impossible. However, now that I've got my new cookbook, I can now, which is by Edibles, it's called Small Bites for the Modern Cannabis Kitchen. So I have a couple questions, though, for Sam, because I'm still trying to figure out the dosage part of all of this, because the way that the recipes are designed is somewhere between 5 and 7 milligrams each serving, I guess is how it is.
A microdose, yep.
So, so this is my honey. I made honey. Oh my God. I made honey. Yep. I just used the honey jar to put it back in there, right? And the way you make it, it's really easy. This is the can of oil that I made. And it's interesting because it's not as green as I thought it would be. And then here's my can of butter. that I made.
Right. A lot of people use the can of butter. I know.
I got to tell you, it's so true, Jimmy. It is so time consuming.
Right.
It is not. This is not for somebody who, like me, who when a recipe calls for coffee, that means not the coffee grounds. It means the actual coffee. I'm not a good baker, okay? So
Gotcha.
you have to follow the directions.
Right.
But what I'm finding is that the dosage that they recommend for some of these recipes, for some reason, they're not that potent for me. And I get it. It's probably because, something to do with my cannabinoid,
your endocannabinoid system,
My
which is tied to
right.
your metabolism.
or your metabolism.
Right.
So I made brownies. So we made me and my girlfriend got together. We spent an entire afternoon just between decarbonization.
Decarboxylation.
We should do a quiz. We should do a quiz. And then it's not over. We spent the whole afternoon cooking because you have to do it slow and steady, and you got to make sure the temperature, you don't burn it. Okay. But then once you cook it and then it cools, then you have to strain it through a cheesecloth, and then you have to put it in the refrigerator. So it's not like, boom, you have can of oil, or boom, you've got can of butter and you can start baking. You actually have to wait 2 days to be able to use it. So then the following week, we got together and we made coconut dipped chocolate bars. We made these chewy chocolate Elvis cookies. And my girlfriend has really gone overboard. She's making pumpkin muffins today, pumpkin cannabis muffins today. And then she made banana bread chocolate chip cookies, which were phenomenal. But again, I can't seem to
get a buzz from the.
It's not get a buzz. It's I use cannabis to help me sleep. Besides, the CBD I use to, from inflammation and just old age, kind of thing, aches and pains. But I have trouble falling asleep. And so I really reach out to the edible side of, humanity. And so I made so those coconut bars and the cookies and stuff, I'm eating them. I'm waiting an hour. I'm like, it's 11 o'clock. I'm so tired. I just want to go to sleep already. So I made a box of brownies. Ghirardelli's are my favorite brownie mix. Against all rules, why the kids got me the cookbook was so that I would make stuff from scratch. And I, substituted, I think it's a third cup or something like that of the oil, and substitute it with my can of oil. And I have to eat an entire brownie. Now, when I did it the different way, the way that I believe the Cleveland Cleveland Cannabis, I forgot what her name was.
Linda Berry, Cleveland School of Cannabis. Yep,
Right,
that's
Linda.
what I'm here for. Yep.
Right. So when I did it the other way that she said that some people like to do it, where they just put the flour and the butter or the oil, whatever's going to be going into that specific recipe, I could only eat a half a brownie. I would it would hit me like a Mack truck and I'd pass out, which was great.
So it did the trick, Karen. That's good.
But that's the other way of doing it.
Gotcha.
Not the way that, based on the edible cookbook that I have, I wanted to see, well, what if I use the can of oil that I made and put it in the Ghirardelli brownie mix and see what happens. So it does work. I just have to eat it whole brownie. And the brownies are small. I mean, they're like bites. They're not huge or anything.
Brownie bites. I like those. And by the way, a lot easier to get brownie bites if you walk down the aisle. They're right on that shelf as I walk down the aisle, I can grab it. I do want to ask Sam a question about the oil, because this is oil that you gift to your meals.
Yep.
How do you create that oil? Whose weed are you using to create the oil? And go ahead. Now, I'm guessing this is a story too.
We get donations for our cannabis, and we do make the oil. Nick, my chef partner, makes the oil. We use a sous vide method, which is not something we've talked about today because it's a little bit higher end and you need some other equipment involved. But sous vide is a really consistent way to do it because you have so much control over the temperature. So that's how we typically make our oil and then strain. So we don't have the flour in the actual oil. But there's...
Now, do you strain it through the cheesecloth or do you strain it through like a colander? Or is it, do you need
it's like a cheesecloth.
Cheesecloth,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because it is very fine
Yep.
at that point, and you want it to be broken down when you're doing kind of what so was talking about is
Linda.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, what she was talking about with like having the most surface area.
Yeah.
So that's what we typically use. But we have a specific math. We're doing the method and math based on a certain amount of oil having 20 milligrams in it. We have the ability to make stronger oil. So it sounds like that might be the solution for you, is making a stronger oil or butter if you need a higher dosage. And we were talking to a client about like our dosage is pretty low. 20 milligrams in our in that oil, works well for somebody who wants 10 milligrams. If they want more, like we have a client that's talking about doing, they want 15 milligram cookies, something like that. We're giving recommendations for that, and you would need a stronger oil for that because the amount of oil that recipe requires is not going to give you the milligrams that you want. So we were recommending an olive oil cake, for example, which is something that you might want to try.
Oh, yeah.
So if something that uses a lot of olive oil, if you have something that's not as strong and you want a stronger dosage, right?
Yeah.
So, or you can make, if you want to use a smaller amount of oil, you can obviously make a stronger dose. But with the oil you have, if it's too light for the amount you're using, then like an olive oil cake is a nice option for you maybe to use that oil and get the dosage that you're looking for by eating less.
So it doesn't have anything to do. It doesn't have anything to do with the potency of the flour.
It does. I mean, that is certainly part of it. I mean, if you're using dispensary grade flour versus something that's more mid-low grade, you are going to feel the effects of that, absolutely. And the only way you're getting dispensary grade is from a dispensary, and they're doing the best they can. So, like for example, I only really eat. What I consume is dispensary level flour and edibles specifically because it's important for me to know exactly what milligrams I'm getting because I'm such so low dose. We're really consistent with our oil, which is, I would say, one step down from dispensary grade. So I can do 10 milligrams of our oil. That works really well. But from an edible standpoint, I'm usually only taking 5 milligrams at a time.
Yeah, see, it comes down to your own personal preference for the buzz you want,
right?
Plus
so
your
metabolism,
your endocannabinoid system, and unfortunately, you really have to. You're a self guinea pig.
Right, you're experimenting.
Right.
You're experimenting, exactly.
Right. Which is important to do, and important to do, I think, for everything. And everyone always did that when they were younger with alcohol. Why haven't they done it with cannabis? So it helps you figure it out.
But
well, today I used the honey. I put a teaspoon of the honey in my coffee today.
Yeah.
And I did that in the morning, and I have been so focused, laser focused. It's been great.
Right.
That's what I do. I use cannabis to get work done, to work out, things like that. So for me, it's absolutely a help to me. And I know what milligrams to use. I know I'm basically always using sativa. But I'm absolutely focused when I use cannabis, and that's how I use it. So, but it took me a while to get there. Like not everybody knows what strains to use and what how much to take, and it takes a little while to kind of figure yourself out and figure it out.
Karen, one of the things that I know we've learned, I think we've actually talked about this in some of our debrief sessions, is the movement towards a cannabis diary, where you're actually especially if you're using it medicinally and you want to keep track of the strains, what you used, how many milligrams, what effect it had. I mean, there are apps now out there that will help you with that as well. I'm just amazed that, you know, I think for years when you took a hit, there was that instant gratification, that instant kind of like, oh, wow, caught a buzz off that one hit, 2 hits, whatever. You know, back in the day, we had to smoke a whole bag to get to 2 or 3 hits. But, you know, that was back in the day. And now it's a completely different animal. But you still have to, what works for me is not going to work for you. It's not going to work for you. And yet we all recognize that there was a socialization about passing the joint. In the circle, around the corner, in the back, in the alley, wherever we were partaking.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Sure.
Well, you know, it's so funny you mentioned that. So I got to give a plug here to the Weedjits group because they have these filters. So if I am going into a social, I'd say, look, if you want to, here's a filter for yourself. Here's a filter for you. Here's a filter for you. So, you know, granted, I'm sure if one of us had COVID, I'm going out on a limb thinking we'd all get it because we were sharing the air. And the smoke, which we're now recognizing is the way that this horrible virus is spread. And again, we try our best to keep a social distance in this studio. It's one of the things, as you guys know, I constantly preach. We got room, okay? We're not on top of each other. We got room. We've got the windows open here too. And luckily they're not banging down the doors or cutting internet lines or anything like that outside today. So,
well, I think that what we're doing, Jimmy, is we're trying to educate the industry because a lot of the industry, I hate to say it, is uneducated. And if you want to partake, you can do it and you can have fun with it. It's not, this is a great, that's why I love working for you and working on the show because I am learning so much. And I've been smoking since I was 13. So, you know, apparently I've been pretty successful in business and I haven't stopped smoking since I was 13. I mean, maybe there was like a couple years in between there. So that stigma is, you know, or when I was pregnant. But, you know, it's not what everybody makes it out to be. And that's what's so frustrating.
Right, and it's actually, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you stopped when you were pregnant, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, no, and you had no issues by stopping. It wasn't like you were scratching and climbing the walls and withdrawal. By the way, skip a day or two of caffeine. How's that work out for everybody, right?
And just so you know, Jimmy, that does happen. You do get a headache. You do, because when I traveled abroad 3 years ago with my girlfriend, I didn't. You know, I knew I was not going to be able to smoke. And I did. I went through those, but just like as if you would if you stopped drinking coffee. It just gave me a bit of a headache because you're used to doing it. And so your body is used to it, just like you drink coffee. But once I got past that, I didn't withdraw. I didn't miss it. I didn't need it. It wasn't,
I would miss it.
And everybody, and I took 10 years off. I want to make sure every time I tell my own personal story. And I said, when my son was born, I was 32 years old. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to stop, prove to myself that I can actually be a functioning member of society, not partaking on a daily basis. And I actually accomplished that as well. So, you know,
I actually used it with my third child because I wanted to go into labor. So, and it worked. It worked.
Yeah,
2 hours later, my water broke.
I've heard this. This is not the first time I've heard this.
I have friends that have used cannabis during pregnancy. I feel like all the research is very inconclusive.
Right. And they've never come up with anything definitive yet.
Right. So I think that comes down to a personal preference, and that's not, you know, and if I ever decide to have children, then that's a personal preference I'll make.
You realize that now if my family's been watching, I'm going to hear about that.
Well,
because they didn't know that.
Well, it might explain. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that at all. Karen, as always, you do bring quite a bit to the table on so many fronts, and we appreciate you checking in with us from California. What's the temperature out there today?
No, it's crappy today. You don't want to know. It's crappy. It's overcast, gloomy. It's like 66 or something. It's gross.
Wow.
It's not
Yeah,
that
it's
different
not
from here.
nice.
Wow, that sounds like the weather outside. Although it was 70 degrees here today.
It was almost 75, I think,
It was
at
a
one
70.
point.
Yeah, it was a very nice day. We're getting a little bit of a tease. You better take advantage of it over the next few days, and then who knows when you'll see it again. Because
Well, thanks for November
having
me, Jimmy. Nice to meet you, Sam, and I hope to have you on the show again.
There you go.
Yeah, love to.
There you go. That's Karen Solomon checking in from California. And I told her with that cookbook. Have you seen the movie I, Julia? Of course.
No.
What?
I haven't.
And you're in this business?
I don't.
That's about Julia Childs. And it's a woman who started blogging, and she did every recipe in Julia Child's cookbook.
Oh, no, I know what you're talking about.
I,
didn't
Julia.
see it, but I know what you're talking about.
And if you haven't seen it, please check it out. You'll enjoy it. And it's a funny movie. It's a very and Lord knows we all need. That's one of the things I learned about in today's show today.
Mhm.
They're talking about coping with COVID.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the mental anguish that a lot of us have to go through. And of course, we were talking about, we all know mothers and fathers who have young children in their houses over the last 7, 8 months. I mean, and it's not easy.
Right.
And one of the things they suggested is watch a funny video. Watch a funny movie. Even if you've seen it before, if it made you laugh the first time, it'll make you laugh again. As a way to cope and help you cope, because we know laughter is one of the greatest medicines. Of course, there's another thing that causes laughter.
You have
that
cannabis medicine before your,
that's right.
your funny video.
That's
Double-
exactly
double
right.
dose.
So,
Yeah.
hey, Sam, you know what? You did a great job. I just want to tell you, I enjoy talking with you. I pride myself on the fact that we can actually have a conversation, talk about cannabis now, live stream it on the internet, and perhaps teach and inform people about what we're doing. And they can actually see, wow, these people aren't like, on the couch playing video games and watching Twitch all day.
Right.
No, they're actually watching Twitch, hopefully, and watching our show and learning something about it too. And we're gonna come up with some new things to make this show even more educational and more fun. I love the idea, perhaps, of the cooking tip of the day or something like that. We'll chat with your marketing department at some point. But really, I love and embrace everything that you guys are doing. We all know Joe Nelson from Ask Cannabis Chefs. He's another one out there. In fact, we're going to rerun the interview I did with Joe Nelson in April 2019. From another studio that was across the hall from where we are in this building. But he came in. He was one of my first guests, and I appreciated that. We've got the entire show with David Yousefzadeh, right? With Dan McCarthy from Weed Talk with Kurt Dalton. That'll also be rerun. But right after this show, we're going to run our Weed Talk News. We do a weekly news video, either with Kurt Dalton or with Ry Russell, our Weed Buds radio guy from Maine. He's filled in a couple times for Kurt. I'm waiting to hear, actually, from Kurt about his availability for tomorrow night. It's not like we wait till the last minute to find out these things. We just have to, because we're so busy putting together as much content as we do. But that'll be coming up following this live in studio stream. And then Dan French has a few others that we've picked up, all having to do with cooking with cannabis, working with cannabis. In fact, I think we're going to find the Warren Bobrow interview, and he has an infused beverage that he works with, and he's a writer for Forbes. He covers the Vice section for Forbes.
Yeah. Nice.
Why does it need to be Vice? Come on. If any, at this point, it's not a vice anymore. It's a plant. It's plant medicine. It's plant food. Everybody's doing plant diets and all this. Just
plant-based.
Accept that it's here. Learn about it. Watch shows like this. Use Google, because Google knows everything. And in fact, I think I heard a recent story that the government's going after Google because they have a monopoly, and they're like, wait a second. Just because we came up with a great idea about search, there are other search engines out there.
Right.
But Google works.
Google does work.
And it's a great name, and it's an amazing company too. So you know what? How much money is enough money in corporate America? That's a question I ask a lot of, right? And I never get a definitive.
I think we've hit too much money.
That's right. I was going to say not enough probably is the answer, or too much is the answer, or whatever it is. But anyway, Friday is our Green Rush show with David Rabinovitz. My goodness gracious. If you thought last week's show with David, with Chris Walsh, the CEO of MJ BizCon, with Jared Mirsky from Wick and Mortar, and another host, Chris Day from Project Evolve, and we had an international call from Peru, a farmer in Peru. If you thought that was a good show, packed with information and interesting people, Friday's show is going to be just as good. I promise you that. And we ask you to tune in. And if you can't tune in live, we get it. Certainly it's available online on our twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, for Dan and Isabel and Karen and Sarah and David and Rick and Sam in studio, I'm Jimmy Young, your host. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Take care.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.